What unhinged thing did you do as a kid that went down in history in your family? As a toddler, every time I got into an area that would echo even the slightest little bit, like hotels or large restaurants or malls, I would moo at the top of my lungs. I earned the unflattering nickname Meggy Moo Moo. As a toddler, I never crawled like other kids. I just kinda rolled around. I'd lay down on my stomach and just roll, man. When I was 3 or 4, my dad and I were in a barber shop. An elderly friend, a friend of the family, was waiting for a haircut and he and I were talking. I think I was sitting in his lap. He had a big nose with a wart on it. I suddenly said, "You've got a nose like a witch." My dad says he could have crawled under a chair, but the old man just laughed and said, "I guess I do, don't I?" I was at the pharmacy when my oldest, who was 3 at the time, saw an ancient old man walk by. Very loudly, he questioned, "Why does his face look like that?" It was very wrinkly and sunken in. The man got very close to my son's face and whispers, "This is what happens when you don't listen to your mommy." That right there is the kind of old man I want to be. So past giving a frick and ready to teach lessons through terrorizing the young. Back during the great cyanide and Tylenol scare back in 1982, my older brother took me trick-or-treating on Halloween. It went something like this. I shouted, "Trick or treat!" The neighbor gave me candy, and my brother tried to remind me to thank him. "Now, what do you say?" And I said, "It better not have any cyanide in it." When I was 3, I woke up early Christmas morning and opened all of the gifts under the tree. My parents kind of had to guess who got what because they were all jumbled together. At around 3 years old, I got curious about my dog's food, so I sat myself down in front of her food bowl and just started stuffing my face with it. After a few minutes, my mum, struggling to keep a straight face, asked me if I'd go with the rest of the family to get McDonald's or if I wanted to keep eating dog food. I looked at her, cheeks stuffed with dry dog food, and said, "Dog food." 18 years later, I still remember what dog food tastes like, and I still crave it occasionally, because life is just weird like that, even though I've never actually eaten it again, to clarify. I chewed on the drawstrings of my sweatpants and got them stuck between my teeth, so my pants were pulled up towards my face. I feel like there will be fewer people who didn't chew on their drawstrings as kids than people who did, but not so many of us successfully made semi-permanent suspenders with our faces, so well done there. My family has a habit of wrapping presents in other boxes. A gift card in an old TV box, clothes in a large shoebox, whatever random gift in whatever random box. I was also a very literal child who never even suspected that the people in my family are so full of malarkey. Cue little 5-year-old me opening up a present one Christmas, looking at my parents with disappointment written on my face, and with all the feigned politeness a 5-year-old can muster saying, "Oh, I guess I could learn to like Hot Pockets." I don't remember the incident. Nobody can remember what was in the Hot Pockets box, but it's referred to at every birthday and Christmas. When I was younger, my mum, my grandma and I went to get some ice cream. Being the unattentive little 3-year-old that I was, I let the ice cream fall. My mum bought me another cone, handed it to me carefully and said, "Keep an eye on your ice cream," and I did. I face-planted into the ice cream. When puberty reared its ugly head, I started calling those phone lines where you talk to women who'd describe doing the deed with you. First, just the 800 numbers. Those voices drove me crazy, but they always asked for credit cards, so I got bored quickly. Then I discovered 900 numbers. Stupid teenage me used a fake name, and just assumed that when they sent the bill, my parents should see the name of someone who didn't live there and toss the mail out. Little did I know it was being charged directly to our telephone bill. Fast forward to the next billing cycle and suddenly I'm being yelled at for like a $1,000 phone bill. Over the years, they typically like to bring it up in conversation when I'm introducing them to women that I'm seeing. It's been 20 years and they've never let me live it down. God damn, if my kids racked up a $1,000 phone bill, they're going to be doing chores till they're 40. Yes, it ended like that for me too. My brother did this exact thing in high school. We were poor and my single mother was furious. She yelled at us for hours and then sent us to bed. We shared a room. After a few minutes, she decided she wasn't done yelling and came back for more. I remember laying in a dark room with my mother standing in the doorway. Her last words were, "Do I need to stand here and talk dirty crap to you while you fall asleep?" I responded before my brother and said, "You'd better say no." My mother closed the door after that, and later she told me she was choking back laughter. Luckily, the phone company dropped the bill when she told them it was a minor who made the calls. I was around 11 years old and stayed home from school because I was sick. I'm admittedly a huge hypochondriac, so what better to do on my day off than to hop on WebMD and find out why I'm so sick? After 5 minutes of research, I'd pinned it down to one thing that it absolutely had to be: ovarian cancer. I called up my mum, who's a nurse, and told her the devastating news. I was met with hysterical laughter. There I am, sitting in my bed, heartbroken that my own mother is laughing at my inevitable demise. And that was the day that I found out that men don't get ovarian cancer. My brother and I once built a road for our toy cars out of sliced sausage and jam. Our neighbour across the street had a cat called Smuckers. Great cat. I was around 4 and still learning how to pronounce stuff. My older cousins on my dad's side found out about this cat, and every chance they got, they'd say, "Peeves, what's the kitty's name?" And I'd happily tell them the name, but I could never quite pronounce it right, and I'd replace the S and M with F. I'm 23, and some of them are married with children, but they still laugh at me about it. I needed a cup for baseball during elementary school, and the default one was too big and uncomfortable for my crotch. I proceeded to measure said region and report my findings to my mother so she could buy the appropriate-sized nut protector for me to wear while playing catch. I needed a cup for karate practice in 3rd grade. I was handed one by my instructor and told to change into it in the bathroom. I came out wearing it backwards, with the cup part on my butt. I guess I thought it was for emergency poops. I was playing around in our front yard when I was around 3 years old, while my parents were on the front porch reading the newspaper together. Off in the distance, they heard me say, "Here, kitty, kitty, such a pretty kitty." And at first they ignored me and just kept reading together. I guess thinking I was using my imagination or something. Eventually, my mum glanced over at me and immediately proceeded to scream. I quickly dropped the dead possum I was holding, covered in ants, and began crying because my mum had yelled at me. They got my eyes checked after that. There was nothing wrong with them, I was just a very confused 3-year-old. When I was learning to ride a bike, I insisted on only going downhill with the wind behind me. Now, if I do anything, my parents will say, "Make sure you're going downhill with the wind behind you." When I was young, like 2 or 3, I'd walk around the neighborhood and walk in the neighbor's house and sit at their kitchen table until they came in and gave me a pudding cup. They didn't eat them and would buy them exclusively for when I'd come over. Despite the breaking in, I still wouldn't help myself to the food until it was offered. How sweet! It reminds me of my grandpa when he came over on Sundays. We'd hug him and beg pennies from him. Yeah, I'm old. Pennies were worth something back then. Grandpa would hem and haw and reach into his pocket like, I don't know, I had to spend a lot of money last week. Then he divided the pennies in his change among the 3 of us. Later I learned he saved all the pennies he got all week just so he could go through his little ritual with us. He was a sweet man. My mother was driving somewhere with my little brother and I in the back seat. I was maybe 5, which would have made him around 3 or 4. We were chattering with each other and she had just kind of tuned us out to drive. At some point, she heard something, though, that made her tune back in. "Okay, hold real still." At that point, it dawned on her what we had been discussing. She swerved the car over to the side of the road, turned, and screamed, "No!" I had a hammer swung back, ready to knock all of my baby brother's teeth out as he eagerly bared them for me. My dad had left a hammer under the seat of the car, and I'd found it and somehow convinced my brother to let me knock out all of his teeth for the tooth fairy money so that we could be rich. This feels exactly like the kind of crap that my brother and I would get up to the second either of my parents turned their backs. Honestly, I think parenthood for them was more akin to being a lifeguard. They could not let their gaze down for a second. I was 4 when my parents suddenly heard me crying on the beach and running around spooked. I was screaming, "The beast! The beast! The beast!" again and again. Honestly, my parents thought I had a heat stroke until they saw a really tiny crab, a bit over an inch, that was chasing me. It was running, following me around, probably proud to be able to scare such a big monster. That was not my proudest moment. As to why I was followed by this crab, they have several theories. That the tiny crab was proud to be able to finally spook someone, that it fell in love with me despite it being a crab and me being a human, that it wasn't chasing me around but running with me, trying to escape Satan whose entrance I was actually announcing, and they also told me that around 6 years old I learned how to properly grab crab, and oh boy, the tables turned. I became some sort of terror, grabbing crabs before they tried to chase me around. My first experience with them apparently was the beginning of a long war. And did I manage to get rid of them? Yes and no. They got undercover agents. Both my best friend and my fiancé are cancer. Damn those crabs, always keeping an eye on me. Once when I was young, a business buddy of my dad visited our house. He told me my dad was his boss, so naturally I replied, "I'm the boss of my own poopy." I'm glad I don't remember who it was, but he no doubt remembers me. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. When I was a kid, I had one of those toy gavels that squeaked when you'd hit something with it. One day, when I was about 4 or 5, I ran into the living room when my mum had a bunch of family and neighbors over. I hit the table with this toy 3 times, squeak, 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 and said, "Order! Order in the court!" Everyone got silent and gave me their attention. I proudly proclaimed, "Peter Pan has a pee-pee," and promptly ran out of the room. Mum says the entire room was dying for a good 5 minutes. And yes, I used the medically correct YouTube unfriendly word for the male organ instead of pee-pee. I just learned the difference between boys and girls, so I wanted to flaunt my new knowledge and apply it to my favorite cartoon character. My mum was laughing too hard to talk to me about it, so I don't think I ever got a second talk of when to flaunt my knowledge. I lived in a very small town growing up, so my parents gave me a good amount of freedom at a young age. Everyone in the town knew everybody, and starting at around age 4 or 5, I'd ride my bike everywhere. Baseball park, candy store, town park, barbershop, those things. I particularly loved going to get my hair cut since the barbershop was a classic guy's guy place, where it was always the same 6 men working, 5 Italian guys from the same family and 1 Portuguese guy who was their friend. I'd just go in and sit down and my dad would pay for it the next time he went in for a cut. For some reason, young me hated getting my hair cut by the Portuguese guy, Tony. I'm not sure if it was because he was rough with the clippers or if I just didn't think he was as funny as the rest of them. But whatever it was, I'd wait an extra 20 minutes to avoid him. This particular time I went in, Tony was hell-bent on getting me in his chair. He offered me candy, a free cut, even offered to sing to me, but none of his attempts caught my interest until he told me, "Vinny, sit down in the seat and tell me what you'd like. You sit in the seat and you're the boss." I clarify, "I sit in that seat and I become your boss?" "Yeah, you're the boss. Take a seat." "I'm the boss." "You the boss." "I'm the boss?" "You the boss." I hopped in the seat giddily. "All right, you're fired." And I jumped right back on out of his seat. The entire barbershop took a minute's pause for laughter, and poor Tony was standing there cursing in Portuguese, slapping his towel on the empty seat. My dad came in a week later, and reports were that there was another immediate burst of laughter when he walked in, and they were struggling to get the story out with all their chuckling. They didn't charge him for the cut I got that day. So my son was in the Cub Scouts and was eager to become a Boy Scout. So he'd come in all the time asking me what he needed to do to become a Boy Scout. One day, out of frustration, I told him the joke that I'd heard as a kid. How does a Cub Scout become a Boy Scout? Well, he eats his first brownie. For those of you who don't know, a brownie is pre-Girl Scouts, same idea as Cub Scouts. Well, that's the last I heard of it from him for a few weeks, and I forgot all about it. Then one night at a Cub Scouts meeting with several different troops present, the head person asked the crowd if anyone knew what they had to do to become a Boy Scout. Well, most of them have that deer stuck in headlights look going on, but not my son. He's waving his hand in the air like a madman. They call him up, and he says to 100 parents, kids, and troop leaders, "My daddy told me all I had to do is eat a brownie to become a Boy Scout." And that is the funniest memory I have with my son. My parents always talk about the time they got my brother his new bike when he was about 10. He'd only ever ridden BMX-style bikes with kick brakes. His new bike had hand brakes. We took a trip to Yosemite and he went down a hill, built up speed and panicked. He forgot how to use the brakes and slammed into a UPS truck at full tilt. It was hilarious to my parents because he was okay, but the UPS guy was super confused about what hit him. When he finally understood what had happened, he was cracking up. Basically, every time my folks get a drink in them, they laugh about the time they and a UPS guy laughed at my brother for crashing his bike. I apparently left our apartment by myself and went to a nearby playground to mess around when I was 3. My mum has a degenerative spine disease, and I remember when I was around 5, I learned in Sunday school that we'd be made perfect in heaven. I was really excited that my mum's back would be perfect in heaven and that she would be able to run and play with me. I told everyone that someday my mum's back wouldn't hurt. Soon after, we went to Walmart and one of the greeters was missing a hand. Apparently, I ran up to the man, put my hand on his stump, locked eyes with him and said, "In heaven, you'll have your hand back and you'll be perfect." He actually started crying a little and hugged me, but at the time, my mum was horrified that I'd grab a stranger like that without any hesitation. I think how you feel about this one might depend on your religious affiliation. I guess the good intention was there, and at least it turns out that this person took it the right way. But yeah, if someone told me to cheer up because things would be better in the Christian afterlife, I would be baffled at best and disgruntled at worst. My favorite dumb childhood story isn't mine, but my brother's. He was 6 and I was about 3. We had a huge backyard at that house with tons of bushes and trees to play hide and seek in, a big abandoned shed in the back with spooky stuff inside, and a river below so that we spent almost all of our free time outside. One day we were playing outside all afternoon and my brother mentioned something about needing to go to the bathroom. We agreed that it didn't make sense to pause the game to go the whole way back to the house and upstairs to the bathroom. I assumed that this meant he'd pee in the bushes or something, but it turned out he needed to go number 2, and he proceeded to just straight up crap his pants. We only played a few more minutes before our mum called us for dinner. I watched my brother waddle back into the house, his pants becoming droopier with each step. He walked confidently into the kitchen and sat down at the table as though nothing was wrong. My mother took one sniff and said, "Timmy, did you have an accident in your pants out there?" Still full of confidence, my brother looks her dead in the eye and says, "No," and picks up his silverware like he's about to eat. My dad just sighed, grabbed him by the collar, and dragged him upstairs to take a bath without another word. My brother pretends that he doesn't remember this incident, but I will never let that story die. I used to live in a brand new neighborhood. I had a friend that lived nearby, and the fastest way to get to his house was to cut across this dirt lot behind my house. One time it was raining, and I decided that I was going to go chill with my friend. I ended up stuck knee-deep in the mud. Like, completely stuck. I lost a shoe, had to have my dad pull me out. Of course, my parents have it on camera. Of course, it got played at least once every 5 years. Thankfully, that video died a slow VHS death. Oh, my grandma loved this story. She and my family loved it enough that they told it at her funeral. I'm 21 now, but when I was about 4, I'd gotten up in the middle of the night and gone downstairs to mess around. I decided to play with the phone. Then, I decided I should use my recently acquired phone skills to call my grandmother. Her number was one of the first ones I'd ever memorized. Mind you, it was like 2:30 in the morning by that point. So my grandmother actually got up and answered the phone, thinking it had to be important if someone was calling at this time. Nope. She answered the phone and the first thing out of my mouth was, "Mama, what are you doing up?" in my scoldy kid voice. My family thinks it's pretty funny. I pooped in the tub when I was around 3 years old. I started screaming and crying, and when my mum walked in, I screamed, "Look at what you made me do!" To this day, she brings it up and I laughed just typing it out. Oh god, the amount of times I've heard my mum tell this story. She told me to stop playing and come eat dinner, and I responded by saying I already ate. When? Yesterday. One time when I was young, I was helping my dad de-root dandelions out of our yard. After a while, I was like, why are there so many of these frickin' things? And my dad said, well, there was this little boy who came into our yard and spread dandelion seeds everywhere. I said, annoyed, we should kick his butt. It was me. I was the one who spread the seeds. There was one night when my parents learned I knew how to escape my crib. From what they've told me, there was one night where I found my way out of there. I then crawled all the way downstairs to the kitchen to get a jar of pickles. There was a pickle jar in the door of the fridge and I took it out and began to carry it back upstairs to my room. However, upon getting upstairs, or sooner, I'm not sure, I discovered I couldn't open them. Imagine my mother's horror as I woke her and my dad up holding a pickle jar saying one of the only words I knew. Open! I think I was about 2 years old. I was walking through a shopping mall when I was about 3 years old. I asked my mum to buy something. She said no, so I decided to throw it on the ground and proceeded to scream at her to get in the effing bin. She was shocked, obviously, but more concerned about where I'd learned such a thing. Fast forward a couple of days and my mum could hear my dad yelling at the dog that he'd put him in the fricking bin if he dug one more hole. And my mum tells this story all the time. I love it. I was always a very chatty little kid. Occasionally, that caused problems for my parents. For example, one time when I was about 4 or 5, we were preparing to go visit my dad's side of the family for Christmas. They all smoke, a habit of which my mum rigorously disapproves. Anyway, this particular day we were packing our stuff. My dad asked my mum if we should bring the video camera along. Crankily, my mum snarled back, "Why bother? You can't see anything anyway, not through the haze of smoke. It's probably bad for the lens." My dad just sort of laughed, and we didn't bring the camera. It was one of those huge old ones. It was a lot of trouble to pack. So, fine and dandy, right? It was about a 6-hour journey. We finally get there, and we're hanging out. My Grammy says to me, "Hey Bobby, did your parents bring the video camera to record you opening your presents?" And without missing a beat, I cheerily replied, "No, Mummy says you can't see anything through the fog of smoke anyway, so why bother?" Then I went skipping merrily away while my poor mother probably sank to the floor in shame. My cat never used to eat her biscuits in front of me, and I never understood why, so I used to get on my hands and knees and show her how to eat them, by eating them myself. The other favorite was when I was really into making potions in the backyard. I had my first crush and knew I needed my own DNA to make a love potion work, so I cut what I thought was a little bit of my hair off to put it in. I ended up cutting an uneven, massive chunk of my fringe. I remember crying behind a book at school the next day because the boy I had a crush on would never like me back because of how bad my fringe looked and because the love potion didn't work. What's the most disturbing thing you've seen when performing a background check on someone? The place at which I'm a board member fired someone this week for social media, posting pictures of vulnerable individuals and making fun of people with Down syndrome on a personal Facebook. A family member notified staff about the posting. The staff member thought it was outrageous to be fired from the Camp for Special Needs Kids for the posts. "I can't believe I frickin' work with handicapped people all day." You're fired." "Oh, but boss, I wasn't insulting the differently abled." "Oh?" "I was talking about you." I wouldn't necessarily call it disturbing, but it was the deciding factor in not hiring somebody. We interviewed a guy for an entry-level position. His interview went well, and the other 2 people on the hiring committee were enthusiastic about him, but something about him bothered me. I don't normally check applicants out on Facebook, but I decided to in this case. His most recent post was something to the tune of, "Just got fired again, this is so much bullcrap." Someone asked him in the comments what happened, and his response was, "It was my 3rd no-call, no-show. I was too hungover to bother. Those buttholes had it coming for scheduling me right after a holiday." Entitled, irresponsible, and daft enough to broadcast it in a public post? Sign me up. I've had applicants say this kind of crap to my face in an interview. So what you're saying is that your last 4 employers were all out to get you? Seems plausible with no other explanation. A guy who said he had an assault charge 15 years ago. He wasn't lying, but that was the start of 27 pages of criminal history that included 2 years of incarceration, during which time his app said he was self-employed as a carpenter. The history was predominantly assaults, thefts, and possession of illegal substances. I had never seen 27 pages of criminal history on one person. I will add this though, he actually did turn his life around. He ended up working at the gym I went to and then got an additional job at a seafood distributor. I would never have guessed that he was the guy that would turn it all around, but he did. We had a guy interview a couple of months ago who claimed he had a couple of DUIs in the past. Job doesn't require driving, so not a deal breaker, and they schedule him for a substance screening and physical. Then his background check came back. He didn't have a couple of DUIs, he had 13, along with numerous convictions for theft, assault, domestic violence, substances, etc., totaling 65 pages. He was promptly called and had the job offer rescinded. Boy, feels like you either get none or you get all of the quirks at once in some of these cases. Or the ones who only have a couple of minor offenses aren't problematic enough to be reported here, I suppose. He was hired before I started, much before, but I'd been doing an audit for our files and I noticed his background check had a conviction for his behavior with children, or something like that in the 80s. This was a man my boss regularly had play Santa at Christmas parties, where the children would sit on his lap. This was the moment I realized the president of the company was a fricking moron. But that guy got fired for insubordination like a year or so ago, so there's that. Frick, background checks for anyone that works with children. Not an employer, but I handle work comp claims. Just had a guy complaining complete incapacity while going on 4 trips to Asia and back, as well as hyping his business all on his Facebook page. Just send a subpoena for his business records, so that should be fun. I used to work in a department that did background checks on potential childcare employees. One guy had been charged with assault of a minor by instrumentation when he worked at a church daycare and had subsequently been let go and charged. He was out on bail and applying to work in a different church daycare. The problem was that he'd only been charged and there was no conviction yet, so he didn't show up on any of the registries. I don't remember how I found out about the charge, but it was an accident. I think it was maybe a newspaper article or something. If an employer checked my background in Facebook, they would just see what a boring life I have. And you're hired. With minimum pay. Mine would just see a bunch of random posts that my mum tags me in, like 4+ a day, and nothing else. Not so much Facebook, but I will Google people. I Googled an applicant we interviewed and seemed to like. Unfortunately, their top results were losing their nursing credentials for writing fake prescriptions for controlled substances. A few years back. And a recent police arrest for driving under the influence and having prescription substances without a prescription. It actually made me sad as they seemed likable, but off. Unfortunately, not in a place to risk trusting someone with such a poor history of judgment and addiction issues. Question. I deleted all of my social media accounts. Is it a red flag to not be involved in social media? No, employees might think you're just hard to find, or if your name is common enough that they can't find the right John Smith. I get assigned interns to work with me based on a term or year from the university nearby. I make it a habit to do a quick Facebook search so I'll recognize their faces from the dozen of other interns when they come in. Lots of party pics, smoking green herb, which is legal here, so in the same realm as those party pics, and women in almost no clothing. Also, lots of mirror ab shots, though my field is largely female-dominated. All I look for is the profile picture. I don't do any digging. All the interns I've actually seen get hired have had very normal profile pictures. You know, smiling, with friends, on a hike, etc. Not because of their pics, but because they're the kind of people who understand professional versus private life, and what is appropriate for public viewing. I was doing background checks for the British Airport Authority during a massive hiring drive in 2007, after there was an attempt to drive a car full of gas canisters into the terminal of Glasgow Airport by 2 Islamic extremists. Due to the need to hire several thousand staff in a few months, the normal requirements relating to job stability, etc. were relaxed, so people who hadn't worked in 10 to 20 years were getting interviewed, which led to a few interesting ones. The only one which I can remember in detail was a guy from Belfast. He hadn't worked since 1990, but they were willing to give him a chance. When we checked his history, he had spent 5 years in HMP, the Maze, due to being convicted of terror offences, before being released as part of the Good Friday Agreement. It turned out that the guy spent his life applying to jobs with long recruitment processes that he couldn't get due to his particular conviction, as that meant he was seen as an active job seeker and wouldn't lose his benefits. Remember Trainspotting when Renton tells the interviewers that he's a smack addict? Similar to that. Strangely enough, he wasn't invited for an interview. In short, a convicted NRA terror fighter applied for a job designed to catch people like him. I work for a background screening company. We do not do social media checks, though we are incredibly thorough, because it can lead to a world of problems. For instance, if you find out that an applicant is gay and deny him the job because he has a criminal record or something, not because he's a homosexual, he can claim discrimination and sue. Consumers have to be provided a copy of their background check after the research is done, so they will see that a social media search was conducted. I hope this makes sense. We do not look for sexual orientation, gender, race, etc. This is a hypothetical situation that explains why not to look at social media for a job. There you go, folks. If you're going to put something suspicious on your social media, make sure you also have posts that align you as some sort of discriminated group. This is why my profile is private and my pic is obscure or of me in a costume, so you're not 100% sure it's me. You frickin' furry. Pictures of them smoking green herb or being belligerently drunk. Not that I personally care, but you're just asking for trouble, especially if you're going into a public sector job. Think of it as a reference. Only you're the one giving the feedback on yourself. I actually had one kid who's had a profile picture which was him in the buck, cupping his Johnson with the caption, "Pricks out for Harambe." Did I mention he'd applied for our marketing and social media internship? For your information, this was in New York, so unfortunately herb is still illegal. Not sure if anyone understands what public sector means, but this kid was going to be a state employee. You can see the issue. Uncle Sam gives us a checklist of red flags to look out for. Flat Earth, Jack could have fit on the door, moon landing wasn't real, Harambe was murdered, pineapple goes on pizza, wrestling isn't real, Ken Bone was a hero, Ryan Lochte actually got robbed, Coney 2012, the dress was white and gold. If we see any of these, it's an automatic disqualification. This was actually on MySpace back in the day. I was hiring for a position that involved review of patient medical records in a hospital setting, and as you can imagine, involved a great deal of confidentiality and discretion by the person hired for the position. One of the applicants worked at a bank, but had some prior experience in the medical field, so I was considering her for the position. I checked out her MySpace page and found tons of pictures of her in the bank vault, in her undies, posing suggestively with large amounts of money. The contents of the pictures themselves didn't bother me so much as her complete lack of discretion and stupidity in posting these pictures publicly where any of her employers might have found them. I was disgusted thinking about what she might have done with others' private health information if we had hired her. We had a 40-something lady apply, and whilst doing the usual checks, we went to her Facebook to find her profile picture is of her husband, and her daughter at a swingers party, all completely au naturel, and her with a different man behind her. We were dumbstruck. Second-degree murder. We didn't hire. I'm not an employer, but a few years after I resigned from a job that I'd worked at for years, I found I needed to contact my old GM. I called where I used to work and discovered he had quit, so I decided to look him up online. That's when I discovered that the guy I was working for prior to him becoming my GM had 2 crystal convictions under his belt. I can't judge though, he was one of the most awesome people I've ever worked for. I just thought it was funny. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I was trying to hire a nanny. This girl sends me her application. Everything looks really good. So I put her phone number into Facebook to see what it's like and add her to mine. Her background photo is a girl, on all fours with a bra and panties on and a guy about to do a line off her butt. I was going to send her an email saying, due to your Facebook page, I won't be interviewing you. My husband told me not to help out other parents she's trying to get a job from. I'm a nanny, and I make sure my Facebook is squeaky clean. Granted, I'm a squeaky clean kind of person, but I always think about what I'm posting pictures of, or what or how that will reflect on me. It doesn't help that my last 2 bosses and their parents all asked to add me on Facebook, and my current boss sent me a friend request. But I guess it says something about me when the last 2 families love me enough to want to keep up with me and still include me in their lives. All they see is cute smiling pictures of me and cats. Lots of pictures of cats. I teach small children. I live in the looming fear that my students will learn I have vices like drinking and swearing. Everything is friends locked except for some generic, watch me do completely normal things, photos and quotes. The rule I tell younger people is it something you're comfortable with your boss, grandparents, or a small child seeing? I had a reference once tell me that they had let the guy go for stalking his ex-wife from the company phones. That was his reference. One guy was a huge Phillies fan. End of story. I check Facebook for all my hires. I love the ones who have their page public, so I get to see all of their crazy. Seriously, why try to get a job when you've worked at 10+ jobs in the past year and laugh when you get fired for not doing your job? Or when you post videos of doing stupid crap at work? Or talking about your substance use and partying every night? Or baby daddy drama? Or like when you keep getting locked up in a county jail over and over. Or when you leave a ton of negative reviews of other small businesses acting like servers are your servants when you're applying for a server position. Or baby mama drama. Or these are just the ones I remember off the top of my head, and all of these are actual things I've seen. FYI, be smart people, hide that crap. I once started to do business with someone and decided to check their Facebook. Multiple walls of text about B and C words they had to work with pictures of the individual looking tough to the camera. I figured that when you have beef with everyone you work with, you're a problem. I cut off business after they failed to even show up for our first meeting. It's not disturbing, but a good story. Before my company had HR, I did the interviews with a couple of other people. I interviewed this girl who seemed like a good fit. After the interviews, I looked her up on Facebook. She had just posted, "I just had a job interview. I think it went well. The pay is crap though." The pay wasn't crap considering she had no experience, so my first thought was the obvious. I'm not going to hire her. Later that evening I was in Target and I happened to see her working there. She didn't see me. She had this big smile on her face and was the aura of someone who was very positive. The next day, I did hire her. 5 years later, she worked her way up pretty high. She has an awesome career in digital marketing now. She has no idea. The pay being fair doesn't preclude it also being crap. Likely she was talking crap to her friends to sound cool rather than being legitimately ungrateful. Not disturbing, the opposite. We interviewed a kid who was a total bag of nerves but seemed good, otherwise. just bad at interviews. When we looked him up, his Facebook said something like, "Crashed and burned in an interview today, really down, I would have loved to get that job." We had a big discussion about whether it was genuine, but I figured if he was playing us, it was worthy of a reward anyway. He worked out great. Illegal discharge of a piece from a moving vehicle which caused great bodily harm. Man, why bother trying when we said no felons? My boss interviewed him to maybe find out if it was an accident. Nope. He shot his brother in a heated argument after a drive-by they did together. Said brother is now a quad. It's for a bail bondsman agency too. Moron. I am not a manager, but most of my team participates in interviewing potential teammates. I was preparing for an interview and I routinely Google their names to see what comes up. In the past, I've been pleasantly surprised to find industry-related accolades that the applicant was too humble to list on their resume. But this time, I came up with a long string of blog posts. I got sucked into the rabbit hole at that point, and the next 2 hours were spent reading all of these blog entries about this wife who was involved in widespread internet trolling and bullying. There were websites dedicated to how horrible this woman was, people invested in domain names related to the message, and paid for hosting just to call her out. So I was left with quite the dilemma. As a result of her bullying, her victims and opponents had dedicated quite a bit of time to doxing her, and as a result her husband and his employer. I figured that I would hold on to this information and only inform my boss if we all felt he was a solid candidate that we would hire. The guy came in for the interview, and while I was asking him questions the whole time, I was thinking about his insane wife, but not saying a word. He somehow worked into the conversation that he'd recently divorced, which at the moment further complicated the issue in my mind. When we met as a team after the interviews to discuss how he'd performed, my boss said he wasn't impressed with his responses to the technical questions and didn't seem like a good fit for the team, which was a huge relief to me. I'm not certain what the right call would have been if he had been a good fit. It would be wrong to judge him based upon his ex-wife's actions, but if there's an army of people on the internet targeting her husband's employer in efforts to get him fired, that can be a headache to deal with. Had an intern that was working with our social media marketing group. She put in a really hateful ticket about how she needed Facebook open on the web gateway filter for her job. So one of the guys on our team looked her up on social media just kind of interested. Here was a big long post about how incompetent IT was at my company and how she had to get on her personal cell phone to browse. We all thought her boss should see her post. She was gone the next day. Seriously, you talk crap about the boss's backs to friends and family, not in a place the bosses will find out. Seemed like an average kid, but the entire Twitter feed was furry adult content. Not an employer and not about me, but my mother does check some of her customers out on Facebook for her Amazon and eBay deals. She's a third-party seller on both sites. She once got an order and looked on the person's Facebook. The person was bragging repeatedly there about how she had scammed multiple Amazon sellers out of inventory and got her money back. She cancelled the order for the textbook via Amazon. The customer asked her why she cancelled it. Mom reported that customer and pointed it out to the customer. She shouldn't have her Facebook set on public mode if she wanted to scam sellers. I heard that customer was banned from Amazon soon after that. Oh boy, I once interviewed a guy for an entry-level manufacturing position. He was in his mid-30s, I guess, and he seemed alright, if not a little socially awkward, and mentioned he wanted the job because he had a baby on the way and wanted something solid as he was picking up odd jobs with relatives' companies. This job required basically no skill, so we hired nearly everyone we interviewed. After he left, I went back to my desk and looked him up on Facebook. He was obsessed with Rihanna. Photoshopped himself into pictures with her, had her as his cover photo, and had a lot of softcore adult content with her head photoshopped onto the models. Nearly every one of his status updates were about her. It was freaking weird as heck. The kicker, though, was that his profile picture was him with a photoshopped picture of a pregnant Rihanna with his hand on her belly. He did not get a call back. You know what? I'm starting to think that he might not have actually had a baby on the way. Used to be a staffing consultant and had to background check everyone. Had somebody with first-degree murder pop up. That was pretty weird considering we do the backgrounds while they're in the office. Had another guy have a B&D pop up, and he wanted to explain. He and some friends broke into a co-op and put all the feed against the door so the owner couldn't get in. It was meant to be a prank, and now it's on his record. My supervisor wouldn't let us hire him, which I thought was lame. Don't do dumb things as adults, kids. I interviewed a guy in his late 50s. He hadn't worked for years as he had been a single parent to 4 kids. He passed the interview, support position working with elderly people. We then went on to discuss a DBS check, which is where you check any criminal record. He said it would be fine, he didn't have a record. He then asked me how long records stay on the system for. I said, "What am I looking for? Forever." "Oh," he said. "Well, I do have something to admit to. My wife said I shouldn't say anything about it, but I guess I'll have to. When my first wife left, I couldn't work because of the kids, so I got involved in adult films. I'm not sure how, but it led to films involving the kids, and I was sent to prison." The room went silent. I honestly did not know what to say. I was just aware that I was in a room, alone, in an empty office with this disgusting, vile man. He must have known and said, "I'll take it I haven't got the job." I said, "Sorry, no." And he left. I wish I'd said more, but I was so shocked and a bit scared. Red pill and racist pages they've liked or commented on. Some guy had an incredible resume and interviewed really well. Then we saw his comment on Mexicans and one particular recent school shooting. Yeah, we passed. Not an employer, but when I was working at my last job, my supervisor would always come up in my suggested friends. I'm quiet and reserved, so she was probably curious. I had a goofy Mimi profile picture and a cover photo of Louis Theroux at the time. Don't think it would have been too disturbing. I recently took a promotion and I'm working on my replacement in my prior role. The job requires you to be extremely reliable and able to work with generally no supervision. We're taking our time and doing several levels of interviews as well as informal meetings such as dinners or lunches. Those tend to catch people off guard and I get free food. 2 weeks ago, I was poking around a lady's Facebook page, and most of it was pretty normal, until I found her comment on an article about a cop shooting a dog. She referenced the owners of the dog as monkeys. These people were African American and sided with the cop on shooting the chained-up dog. Her profile was extremely professional except for the article comments. The monkey comment was just the tip. This lady was a full-bore racist. Ex-prisoners. What's the most disturbing thing you've ever heard or witnessed from a fellow prisoner? As the narrator, I feel inclined to warn people that there are some pretty extreme descriptions of violence in these posts. I really mean it. I've done a few grim videos in the past, but there was at least one story here that I had to take a long walk after. You've been warned. One of the women I was in with was in for life. The reason that she was in was because someone had sold her fake smack, so she had decided to murder this person. She goes to their house, cuts the gas line, and burns the house down. Turns out she had the wrong house and killed an entire family in their sleep. She tried to punk me out a few times, but I don't take people seriously if we can't communicate, like intelligent human beings. She was obviously trying to avoid herself in all areas. It was really sad. Had a pool table while locked up. Nobody used the cues or balls to do stuff, because if you got our pool table taken away, you'd better hope they took you away from us too. If fights drew blood, everyone would come out of the woodwork with their little hand towels to clean up all the blood before the COs would come out. I have a very funny image in my head of several thuggish dudes cleaning up blood from a fight. "Oh, you missed a spot, Reggie. Sorry about that, Todd. I'll get right on that." 6 months in Rikers Island, New York. Watched a girl try to drown herself in her cell toilet for 2 hours, just running her head in, trying to stay under, while COs stood and laughed. When they left, she peed on the floor to flood the cell to get their attention again. Not a prisoner, but my professor works with prisoners. She told us she had this client that had recently got out of jail, telling her that the most enjoyable thing in prison was the group's therapy session. He said, "I really love the group therapy because it gave me ideas of other people's emotions when confessing their crimes. It taught me the emotions I'm supposed to feel when confessing in court again to reduce my sentence next time." She was really surprised that this serial killer is that honest, and she was really spooked at the same time. Oh god, there's someone taking acting courses in prison for how to get a shorter sentence so that they can get back out and commit more crimes quicker. I went to jail for about 3 weeks because of driving with a suspended license. We all slept in these huge rooms with bathroom and living area connected. About a week in, I hear some guy get up and use the small microwave that we're given in the living area to make stuff hot like ramen. It's not normal for the microwave to be used after lights out, but I figured that maybe he had a roll or something he wanted to heat up and munch on before sleeping. The guard posted on the far wall never said anything to him or even got up from his seat, though I could tell from my bunk he was watching the inmate. So the guy comes back to the bed area and walks right past me with his bowl in his hands. I close my eyes and try to go to sleep, but the silence is shattered by a blood-curdling scream from a couple of rows down. The guy had filled a bowl with baby oil and heated it till boiling, and then poured it on some guy's face in his sleep. Found out later that they had some kind of fight a few days earlier and the baby oil guy was out for revenge. Burn guy had third-degree burns on his face, neck, shoulders, and chest. Baby oil guy was taken away, and we never heard from him again. Also, we lost our microwave, so to heat things up we had to use hot water from the sink and just let stuff sit in it forever to heat it up. Sucked to be sure, but not as bad as being covered in boiling fricking oil. This is why you can't have nice things in prison. My dad was telling me about how in the POW camp in Colditz in World War II, officers had to eventually ban fricking everything because stuff was being used to either smuggle in contraband or be used as tools for escape and whatnot. Pretty much the only luxury the prisoners had was fruit jam, until a man was found in the yard one day, blinded by the moonshine that was made from it. So this jam was banned too. Well, they may have taken 99% of our luxuries, but at least we still have the delicious jam? Actually. Oh god damn it, Barry. I was in a holding cell for unpaid tickets once. It was way overcrowded. They brought in a new guy who complained right as he entered. Hell no. There are too many people in here, man. He sat quietly for a few minutes while another inmate talked crap to the annoyance of most everyone else. Finally, the new guy, who was bigger than anyone else in the cell and clearly the most veteran inmate, walked up to the talker guy. Sorry, man, I ain't sitting in here no more. It's too crowded. You need to shut the frick up. He then punched talker guy in the face and then went to the door and started pounding it. Guard, I just punched this dude. Come get me. The guards were already on their way, and as they pulled him out, he left with these words of wisdom and commands to the guards. Y'all take me to solitary. I take the assault rap because it's too frickin' crowded and hot in here. It's inhumane to keep so many people in here. Take me to solitary. I envied his clever escape and reminded myself that I was only there for a traffic ticket, and as much as solitary sounded like heaven, it might not be worth emulating his departure strategy. Never been to prison, but when I worked in the ER, I saw a lot of prisoners come in with all sorts of injuries, but two really stand out. The first one was a guy who was shanked in the abdomen and his intestines were literally hanging out. I remember he was stone-faced and wasn't saying anything. Just looked straight ahead. I'm sure he'd been given pain meds, but still. We slid him on the stretcher and I remember I went to move him up the bed a little bit and as soon as I started to slide him up, he grabbed my arm and said, "Hold up a minute, homie, that hurts a little bit," in the most nonchalant voice I've ever heard. The second was a guy who tried to kill himself by stripping into the buck and just laying on the cold floor for hours. The floor was so cold, it ended up dropping his core temperature to around 92 degrees Fahrenheit. A quiet kid we called Harry Potter because of his glasses. He was pretty young and definitely lacking in street smarts, and we could never figure out why he was there. Until we caught the news from a guard that he threw a pot of boiling water on his wheelchair-bound grandma because she was being too loud while he watched his favorite TV show. Out of all the sick crap people were locked up for, that one is pretty hard to swallow. If you ever got locked up, remember to always be respectful of those around you because you never know what kinds of messed up people are in there with you. Stories I've heard firsthand, one guy was locked up with a heap of smack still shoved up his butt. He was popular. Another guy got noticeably drunk on someone else's booze, prompting a lockdown and search. He died from a head injury a few days later. Another group of guys teased the necrophiliac until he had a breakdown and chased them through prison trying to kill them. They hid behind a guard, peeing themselves, laughing while he was subdued. Fun times. I was in juvenile prison. I'd just gotten into the intake unit. The guy that was escorted into the building behind me had committed the unspeakable act. Well, we walked into the unit and some kid walks up to him and starts beating his face. He takes out a toothbrush and starts shoving it up his butt. The COs didn't let that go on too long, but it caused some serious damage. Well, some guys from the unit told me he crapped himself and couldn't control it. Turns out the guy that beat up the crapping boy was the older brother of the boy that had the unspeakable act committed against him by Crap Boy. The most disgusting thing I saw and smelled was when I was on lockup. This one inmate took a coffee bag, filled it with 3-week-old bodily fluids. He then gets out for his 1-hour rec and proceeds to place the open part underneath this other guy's cell door and stomp on the bag. It sprayed the most disgusting, rancid concoction of bodily fluids all over this inmate. After his epic display of biological warfare, he pulled down his pants and shook his wang at the inmates he had just crapped all over. As the man writing this script, I can tell you that you do not want to know the specific fluids that the author wrote that went into the bag. But it was all of them. Whatever you're thinking, it was all in there in a nasty cocktail. Gross. I pleasured myself in a holding cell, not knowing there were cameras watching me. 2 officers walked in telling me to put my wang away because there was a lady watching me on the cameras. Honestly, I was so mortified that I forgot that I was about to get reamed in court. How in the heck did you get in the mood to crank it before court in a holding cell? What the frick else am I supposed to do? 20 hours on a wooden bench with no shoes on, and the floor is so nasty you don't even want to touch it. Ah, the old forlorn nut. Caught guilty of underage drinking. A guy that was there when I got there gets up after an hour or so of me coming in. He goes and sits down on the toilet that's in the same small room as the 10 of us guys that were there, right in front of the window to the officer's desk area/office, and has explosive diarrhea. It's horrible, breathing through our shirts for 2 hours. New guy comes in and is told from an experienced player that he should try and make himself throw up so he won't be in as long. They release you when you're sober. So what's he do? Puts his drunk head into the toilet bowl, rests his face on the seat, and passes out. It was a gross, gross day. Obligatory, not me, but someone I know. They went to federal prison in Ontario for getting caught with a lot of substances. Anyway, he told me that they put smack addicts in with the general population, but they're given a small cup of methadone each morning at a certain time, and they'd sit in the chair and wait for their bodies to absorb it. What some guys would do, though, was shake in their chairs to try and stave off the absorption, and then when they'd get back in their cells later, they'd induce vomiting into a sock inside of a can and use that as a filter. Then it was for sale. Yeah, doing regurgitated smack is a thing in Canadian prison. Severe violence and death of an infant warning. I did a few years in a state prison and saw and heard a lot of brutal, crazy stuff. Murders, the unspeakable acts, fatal amounts of substance use, riots. But the one thing that's never left me was a story a guy told me about his murder case. He was babysitting his girlfriend's new baby, a few months old, and the baby wouldn't stop crying, so he put it in a pillowcase and slammed it against a wall for 20 minutes. He said he knew the baby was messed up after the first hit, but he just kept going. Said it was like a bloody pulp sack. Stuff really messed me up. Also, one of the other bad ones I saw was a guy get stabbed through the eye with a 10-inch knife. Dude dropped, killing him instantly, and he never saw it coming. A couple of people put him in a laundry cart, and the COs didn't find him for about 10 hours. The guy who killed him was 19 and serving an 11-month sentence. He said he just wanted to know what it felt like to kill someone. They convicted him, federal, for capital murder, and he got like 99 years. Unfortunately, there's a lot of young kids who go in with small sentences and never get out. Worked at a maximum security mental health facility. A guy talked about how he didn't understand why he was having nightmares about boiling lobsters alive. This was 5 minutes after he talked about how he killed his ex-girlfriend, cut her up, and boiled her head because she was accusing him of cheating. Oh, and how if he could just talk to her parents, they would understand because she wasn't a good person. I was in administrative isolation, and there was a guy across the way who kept smearing his crap on the plexiglass so the COs couldn't see inside. The guards were sick of his crap, quite literally, so one night when he did it, the CO on watch dared the guy to lick his own poop off the glass. He did. Christmas time in jail. It may have been Christmas Eve, not sure. Many years ago. Nighttime. Around 8 p.m, I guess. They had huts, which could sleep about 20 guys each. I was in the short-timers hut. For some reason they called the long-timers long sweeps. No idea why. Anyway, a bunch of long sweepers started gathering around our hut, just outside the chain-link fence. Massive guys, tats on arms, and even fingers, and all carrying a little something in their fist. Group gets up to about 12 guys, all standing around silently, saying nothing, and we were getting pretty nervous. Then, just as it gets dark, a couple of little possums crawl down out of one of the trees. Little Aussie sugar gliders. Yeah, they really can fly or glide between the trees. Here's a bunch of the biggest, baddest dudes I've ever seen standing around waiting to hand-feed little possums bread and sugar. They were very gentle with them. My brother told me a story about pre-prison when he was in jail. He bunked with a substance addict who was seemingly just dope sick as frick. He said he was moaning and groaning all night. He tried to tell the COs he needed help, but they ignored him, left him be. Then he puked all over himself, and the COs still wouldn't help him. They just left him there all pukey. Then after a while he started seizing. He had 2 seizures. COs did nothing. They thought he was faking. My brother said about an hour later he stopped making noises. He was silent, so he checked on him. He was grey and unresponsive. Totally slipped away. Fricking buttholes let a technically innocent man die of benzo withdrawal overnight. I've seen COs ignore a man who was having a seizure on 3 different occasions. Also, same man every time. It was the scariest thing to witness someone dropping and having a seizure, and the guards were just laughing it off like, "Don't worry, this happens every time he's here." It was fricked up. They did get him help, but they didn't seem to care too much either. Oh, I have one. My friend was a former medical assistant at a local prison. She told me a pretty gross story that happened a while back. One of the inmates, a male, was being manipulated by one of the COs. The CO made the inmate give him oral, and when he tried to tell someone about it, no one believed him. So after the end of oral, the inmate saved the semen in his mouth, spit it in a napkin, and had his family send out the semen to get tested, and that's how the CO was caught. It was on the news and everything, I'm pretty sure. Honestly, as awful as that story is, I'm just glad to be posting one that has an element of justice in it, since most of these are stories of just the awful stuff that goes on inside these places. Mum was a CO at Hancock State Penitentiary in Georgia. Here are my favorite 3. The nicest guy in the place asks my mum if she wants to know what he's in for. He told her that he caught his wife cheating, so he just went and sat in his recliner to calm down. She came out and wouldn't stop apologizing after he told her to leave him alone, so he literally cut her face off. During a riot, inmates are doubled bunk in solitary confinement for a weekend. A young kid, presumably a snitch, was locked in with a significantly larger and older gangbanger notorious for the unspeakable act. The kid spent some time in hospital. You don't need details. Mum came upon a man who was stabbed in the skull right before his release. 6-inch shank sticking out of the top of his head. He kept calling out for his daughter. He didn't make it. Job screwed my mum up to the point where she started smuggling substances into the prison, and we no longer have a relationship. Don't go to prison, folks. I'm a Canadian, however I got caught up in the US federal prison system, USP Atlanta. This place, my friends, is as nasty as it gets. A new fish came in, and after doing his obligatory time in the SHU, he got moved into my unit. When he arrived, he was asked if he had any contraband with him by some of the other brothers. He made a vital mistake by telling them no, but later opening up to his cellie that he had some green herb. In prison, it doesn't take long for the block to know what's going on, and so that next morning when this guy went to the shower, he was jumped by a half dozen or so guys. They proceeded to fill up shampoo bottles with warm water and soap, then stuck them halfway up his butt in order to get the green herb out. Although this definitely would have cleaned him out, it didn't force the green herb out. One of the brothers then put on a rubber glove and went straight into the guy's butthole in order to get it out. Once they got what they were after, they proceeded to knock the guy out and hang him up to send the message. It was pretty messed up, and there was nothing anybody could do. He learned the hard way. I was in a cell for a week in a Denver city jail. My cellmate was in for the week waiting on a pickup to take him over to the ICE holding. He was older, and since he was being held and transferred over an immigration issue, he was deemed low risk. It turns out he was a famous Ethiopian torturer who had killed and maimed hundreds of prisoners. He was part of the Red Terror and was not a good guy. Being in 23-hour lockdown with this guy in a cell the size of a walk-in closet was interesting to say the least. So I've never been incarcerated, however I used to work for our local jails as a medical officer. Still to this day, I'm traumatized by abscesses the size of golf balls, leaking smelly green pus, and a girl we like to refer to as Pharmacy Snatch. Pharmacy Snitch was found taking pills in the book holding cells and somehow smuggled these pills into Gen Pop. She entered my clinic with her hands in her uniform, and I kept hearing a rustling sound of some sort. I promptly called the acting captain in to investigate, and had to witness the good old squat and cough. As Pharmacy Snatch did as she was told, a rubber glove containing 20 pills, a Bic pipe, foils, and a lighter fell out. She had some more pills in her uniform shirt and shoe as well, which is where I heard the noise. She tried to throw it behind my desk. I didn't actually go to prison, but I spent a year in Los Angeles County Jail, which is the most infamous for being the suckiest system in the US. It does suck. It sucks terribly. 1. It was my first week and I was sitting on my bunk when I suddenly hear what sounds like a rabbit dying a gruesome death. Turns out a guy got caught stealing and was getting stomped out. The thief was getting his head stomped on by 3 other guys, over which I found out later was a stolen ramen packet. What went through my mind was, these people are going to put this poor guy into a wheelchair over $1. Not a pretty sight for a first-timer, but what I remember most was the screaming. I reiterate that it sounded just like a rabbit getting mauled. Poor guy left on a stretcher. 2. I heard this from an OG who's been in and out of the system. Apparently upstate, In prison, there's a guy from Grape Street Crip who went by the name Purple Passion. Supposedly, Purple Passion was 6'3", 250 plus pounds, and who, once he found someone he liked, would KO the unfortunate victim and reap the spoils. If he liked it, he'll leave an unwrapped and bitten Snickers bar. If not, then a wrapped Snickers bar. Now, what went through my mind was, how could someone be so cruel yet so considerate as to plant a Snickers afterwards? Also heard of others, if not the same person, going by a different name, Snickers Bandit, and El Joto Magnifico Caliente. 3. You can hear a popping sound, closest I can describe, when someone is stabbed. 4. The Asians, or others, used to have their own exclusive dorm, but that was revoked in the early 2000s when an inmate was killed. I can't remember whether it was over a gambling dispute or because he'd done stuff to kids. Supposedly, there was an attempt to conceal the killing by snapping the bones of the deceased and dismembering the limbs with crude instruments. They then stuffed what parts they couldn't flush down the toilet into the laundry cart. 5. Inmates are housed in either dorms, 60-foot by 90-foot rooms that hold 64 to 96 people, or in cells. I was housed in the former. So we're kept in these concrete boxes, and when a riot pops off due to interracial disputes, there's no place to escape when they start sending in tear gas grenades. If you ever found yourself in one, smear baby oil or Vaseline on your face and wrap a wet towel or t-shirt around. 6. Offenses involving children are frowned upon, even if consensual. There was this one guy, first-timer like myself, who'd apparently given substances to a 15-year-old girl, and they did it. We're sitting in the day room, and he's telling us this like it's something to brag about, and assuredly it got everyone's attention. There were 2 other guys he shared his cell with, both having come down from prison for an added charge. After retiring to our cells, we hear a yell and a scuffle. Turns out the man in question was getting his own comeuppance in non-consensual relations. The entire cell block was cheering this on. The raucous eventually recedes and then silence. Slowly, the smell of feces just permeates throughout the block. The guy had the unspeakable act committed against him, and from what I heard, he stayed under his bunk until the next shower day when he rushed out of his cell begging the guards for help. The food was inhumane. No identifiable meat, plus everything had to be able to be eaten with a spoon because they weren't about to hand out forks and knives. Fun few days. Yep, a family member of mine was in jail for a couple of years for carrying green herb. Don't ask, he was in there way too long and the whole situation was super messed up. He said one of the worst things was the food. They had to eat some mushy Bologna stuff that made him gag when he even talks about it. He said they saw a starving cat outside once and they put the Bologna out for it to eat. The cat smelled it, shook its head in obvious disgust, and ran away. Holy crap, I thought they were about to eat the cat. I was sent to a woman's prison for about 5 years, and there was a girl in there who was famous for getting high on crystal while babysitting an 8-year-old and then killed the kid. Another one that I found disturbing was a girl who threw her newborn into the trash after she went into labor at home. I mean, you hear about this kind of stuff all the time and it's messed up, but then to be surrounded by people who've actually done it is freaking nuts. Also, it was heartbreaking to see mothers getting visits from their young children. Always tears from both parties because mummy still can't come home. A lot of these women were actually good people who just made stupid mistakes. What's your "I'm not even supposed to be here today" story? When I was in middle school, my mum went to work before I woke up, so I always got myself to school alone. On this particular rainy, windy day, I decided to accidentally sleep in till 11 a.m. I lived in northern Colorado where there are hardly any tornadoes, but when I turned on the TV, there was a serious tornado warning for my exact area. We lived in a tiny apartment on the 3rd floor, and all of the neighbors were kinda sketchy. So I was alone and panicking, just wishing I'd gone to school. By then, the weather was too severe to walk the mile to my school, so I hid in the bathroom and accepted my fate, and eventually the weather cleared up. Missed my flight off Kauai and got on the next flight to Oahu. Flight was 20 minutes. Takeoff was fine and we were ascending normally until the plane jolted with such severity as I rose out of my seat. I saw a flight attendant hit their head on the ceiling. People started screaming. The plane was tossed up and down and whipped side to side. I grabbed the arms to my chair like it was a jetpack and held on for dear life. This continued for whole minutes. All I could think was, this is how I die. I'm not even supposed to be on this flight. What a terrible way to end this vacation. Eventually it stopped and the pilot came on over intercom and apologized for the turbulence and told us that the drink service would be suspended. I don't care about juice at this point, buddy. Get this plane on the frickin' ground. Working in a thrift store, covering another manager's shift so she could take her birthday off. Right after I clock in, I see a woman stuffing her purse with used bras and undies and then try to make a run for the front door. I got as far as saying, "Excuse me, ma'am," before she screams and upends her extra-large Taco Bell cup full of Mountain Dew Livewire over my head. She runs into the street and everyone in the store stares at me while I'm dripping in orange bullcrap. I got to work the next 8 hours with sticky, citrus-scented hair. Worked in fast food. Anyways, this one night it was crazy busy and some people had called in. Here I am wanting to check my schedule, but I noticed the massive lines. The one really super chill manager looks at me and motions for me to come to the back and tells me if any of the other managers caught me I would be stuck here all night. It was Friday night and I just wanted to go out and drink. So she literally grabbed me by the collar and dragged me out the back door and closed it behind me. Best boss ever. Nice. Yep, if that was my teenage job at McDonald's, that would be me hauled behind the counter, given an extra shirt, and stuck for the next 5 hours. Lucky you. Also, your boss is very different to literally every other fast food manager in the world, so congrats on that. Not me, but as I'm getting dressed for work as a paramedic, a coworker messages to ask if we can switch stations. I was Station A and he was Station B. In my mind, the stations were about the same, but people usually prefer Station A. I say that's fine and I go to Station B. I proceed to get 0 calls. He was busy the entire shift, including a guy that went into cardiac arrest while driving and hit another car and a tree, and the initial dispatch reported the passenger as being unconscious as well. I heard it all on the radio. He texted me later in the night like, "I'm never swapping with you again." In short, coworker tried to swap for the better station and got screwed. Supposed to be on our honeymoon, but didn't have enough money to go anywhere, so we were hiding from family for the week. Been kinda nice. Came in on my day off because someone called out. Got rewarded with the hands-down worst bite in my 5 years as a groomer. 4 deep punctures, 2 ended up abscessing, and I got a bone infection despite immediate treatment and antibiotics. The constant bandage changes ended up ripping bits off my skin, so I have scars, not just from the bite, but also the bandaging. Everyone who says, "But all you do is play with puppies all day," to a groomer is full of crap. Reluctantly was taking a trip to Hartford, Connecticut one weekend, and on the way caught a flat tire. A friend drives a Lexus, which requires a custom key to remove the tire. I didn't have the key and had to be towed to an auto shop to have the wheel busted off. The whole process took about 2.5 hours, and we were hungry and cranky, so we decided to stop off at a random bar we saw on Yelp, and we head straight there. I walk in and the owner is crazy excited, like running around the bar excited to see us. He insists we sit at the bar with him and he tells us we're his first lunch customers ever. Serves us amazing food. We stay for a while for some drinks with him and we have a good time. Later, a few girls walk in and he's only slightly less excited to see them. This dude had crazy energy. Have a good time for the rest of the night there and end up dating one of the girls we met that night for 3 or 4 months. Really an enjoyable time. The bar was called the Clydesdale Pub. Not actually in Hartford, but it's close in Port Chester, New York. Definitely recommend checking it out if you're in the area. He was serving what he called Brazilian dumplings at the time that were just amazing. I was almost sold into a working girl ring as an infant. I was born in Sao Paulo, Brazil, where my biological parents basically listed me on the black market, intending to sell me for profit. Much to my fortune, a group that posed as buyers on the black market but was actually an adoption agency, or at least worked closely with one, arranged to buy me, then proceeded to literally steal me in a van and spirit me away to Rio. There I was kept safe, and at 9 months of age, a wonderful young couple from Pennsylvania flew down to meet me and take me home forever. I'm now living a fantastic life that was gifted to me against unimaginable odds, and I'm thankful for it every day. And I'm thankful to those who made it possible, whoever they may be. They must have had hearts of gold and boundless courage to enter dangerous situations like that to help the helpless and innocent children like myself. Co-worker's granddad died. I was supposed to be on holiday, but ended up covering her shift. I got there and was informed I needed to fire someone. Well, not exactly. They weren't on high enough warnings yet, so I had to convince her to quit. As a note, I'd properly fired her boyfriend 2 months prior for an unrelated reason. After that was done, an ex-staff member sent me a crapload of annoyed messages that they hadn't gotten a leaving card or gift. I explained that A, they'd given away their last shifts, meaning that we didn't have time to organize anything, and B, it's never been one of my jobs to organize leaving cards or gifts. There were 2 other people assigned to the job. Finally, I'd bought another coworker a leaving gift with my own money on my own time, which had nothing to do with work. Also, a kid chucked up. Everywhere. 11-hour shift in my holiday time, never again. Not my story, but a classmate's. My friend got a baby duck, so she went to go see it. Her friend lived with substance dealers. Cops raided the place, and she was arrested along with the 12 guys that were in the house. They all would have been charged with felonies if the 2 substance dealers hadn't written their names on the bags of green herb. The best part of this story was that the raid happened on the 20th of April. I love college towns. She was still charged with a misdemeanor for possession, by the way, but she kinda got off light. The narrator hopes that the last part only happened because she actually had a bag of the wacky tobacco on her, and not just because she happened to live in the same place. Who knows though, I guess. Georgia State Penitentiary. Was hospitalized over my court date. Social workers took care of it, supposedly. I got back to work at the Air Force and I had a bench warrant out for me. It told me to show up at Georgia State Pen at 5 a.m. I thought I was getting a new court date. Nope. I got a roommate in cell block D. Didn't get to talk to a lawyer until the next day. After a brief conversation, I was released by the warden. And that's how I learned not to drive like an idiot. But at least I can say I've been to prison. Not on my record, luckily. I got fired while on paid vacation leave to spend the weekend celebrating my 21st birthday. I got home from the bar at around 3 a.m. Woke up at 4 a.m. because my phone is ringing. Conversation went like this. Hello? Mr. Drunk Man, it's your boss. We need you to come in at 6 to help open. No one else will do it. Boss, I just got home from the bar. I'm still drunk. Just until 9. We just need you until 9. I'm drunk. It's my birthday weekend. I asked off months ago. But no one else will come in. I'm drunk and on vacation. Please, drunk man, please. Oh my god, for frick's sake, just till 9? Just until 9. Fine, I'll get up and take a shower and call a cab. Thank you. See you at 6. I opened the bakery department, and as an added surprise, the coffee bar, which I wasn't trained to do, and I worked both departments alone for 2 hours serving customers. 9 a.m. rolls around and the boss calls me into the back office as I'm clocking out and fires me on the spot for being at work smelling like vodka and asks me to clean out my locker. Looking back, I was supposed to get my annual raise 4 days later and she knew I'd be drunk. She set me up to work 3 hours so she didn't have to give me a raise. I was working retail and had 2 weeks left until school started again, and I was quitting. This lady let her kid go number 2 on the floor in a clothing rack. My manager approached me and told me the situation and said I was to clean it up. I responded with, I have 4 days left here, I'll quit right now. You don't pay me enough for that. She laughed and said she'd figured I'd say something like that, then we both laughed. Then she said she'd find someone who actually needed the job to do it. I'm a teacher. I was sick and thought I could make it through a school day, but I was miserable. I went to the office to arrange a sub. On the way back to my room to get my car keys, I saw 2 students loitering outside the library. I tried to keep my head down and my ears closed, but as I walked by, one said to the other, Man, I'm gonna frickin' murder that kid with his pencil when I see him. He could have just said anything else and I'd have kept walking. Alas. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below, and if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I stopped by a friend's house. It turns out that was the day the police decided to come and arrest him and search his house. I was on my way out the door when they arrived. I was in the Coast Guard and I had to cover for someone on my day off. Well, the night before was my friend's last day, so we threw down and partied. Normally, when you stand by for someone, it's common courtesy from the other crew to basically give you the day off, unless you're really needed. So I said, screw it. Well, I was hungover on the rec desk, trying not to die, and a pipe goes through that a body had been reported, and they called the crew to make preps and put me on there. The absolute jerks. It turned out to be 4 bloated bodies that had been gotten to by sharks and other fish. Worst smell I've ever smelled. Got back to the station and had to throw away the uniform I was wearing. That sucked, but not as much as CISM afterwards. That's basically when they sit you down with a chaplain and make you talk about what you've just witnessed immediately after you've witnessed said thing with little to no time to process. It supposedly helps, but it for damn sure didn't help me. Last summer, there was this rugby tournament in my hometown. Since I play rugby while at college and my team is participating, I decided to go visit and watch the games. I originally had been unavailable, which is why I wasn't signed up. Anyways, it's a sevens tournament, but they have an injured player after the first game and are down to 6 for the next one. So in order to keep playing, they need another player. They watch me on the sidelines and ask me to play. So you remember that my intention was to come and watch some rugby? Well, too bad. Now I'm borrowing someone's cleats and mouthguard to play rugby in jeans. Jeans. Despite that, though, we still played really well. I was working night security at a hotel at the time. My co-worker and relief got bit by a spider and had necrosis, so I was called in while he was rushed to the ER. An hour into my shift, the entire half of the town lost power, including the hotel. It was in the middle of summer in 100 degrees plus Fahrenheit, and at night it reached the upper 80 degrees if you were lucky. The hotel was 100% full and the parking lot was pitch black. During this time, some dudes on bikes decided to come around and try to break into some cars. I had to chase them off and one of them got brave and tried to fight me and I had to tase him. His friends carried him off. I walked circles around the hotel for 5 hours before power came back. I wasn't even supposed to be there that week. You know, it seems to the narrator like this story can only have come from Australia. There are just too many little telltale signs there, starting with the venomous spider bite. Why do you all live down there? I got called into work one day back when I was working customer service. The girl that had been working that day was in a car crash on the way into work, so I wasn't upset about coming in, just worried for her. Anyway, not 5 minutes after I arrived and clocked in, a lady who looked homeless and absolutely reeked of body odor came in. I worked at a members-only wholesale store, so you had to pay $45 flat fee before you could purchase a single item from the store. This lady came in, wandered around for a minute or two, and then made her way to the counter. Thus started the most bizarre exchange I think I've ever had at a retail store. She said, "Do you sell animals?" "No, this is a wholesale store." "Y'all don't sell chickens? What about just chicks?" "Nope, neither of those. We do sell eggs, but they're unfertilized." Well, do you sell cabbage and hot dogs?" "You bet. Do you have a membership? I'll be glad to set you up and get you ready to shop." "Oh no, I couldn't possibly. I gotta save my bucks for chickens and hot dogs. Can't have one without the other, or the cabbage. I'll try Walmart, I guess. You think they have chickens there? They probably do. I'll go there and she ambled away while still talking, clearly no longer talking to me, and left the store. I'll never forget you, crazy lady, and the way you had lipstick smeared all around your mouth. Also, the girl who got in a wreck was fine, but received a broken arm and a new car from the other driver's insurance for her trouble. I had one, very recently in fact. I was at work, doing very little, like full-screen games little, and my boss walked up to us. He asked if I could go and cover the IT help desk as someone had gone home sick. It's not my job, I'm a server admin, but I'm still in internal IT and couldn't really say no because I was playing games at work. Oh gosh, the amount of grief I got from people. My whole day was spent saying, "I don't know how to do that, I'm not even supposed to be here today." Most people were fine, a few thought I was new, but there were some real jerks. I don't know how those help desk guys do it. It's hard work and you meet some real idiots, even though it's a huge IT company. This is long, but bear with me. I offered to cover on a day I don't normally work, so my coworker could spend some time with her family across the state. It was also the day we were training a new girl. I walk in and one of the other coworkers there starts filling me in on the day before. Apparently, the new hire was all over the map and kept going to the bathroom for 20 or 30 minutes at a time, multiple times, over a 6-hour shift. It was a doctor's office and we opened for the day. Half day, so opening at 1. And she's not here. Not exactly the best impression when you're still training. Half an hour goes by and she says she's walking there and starts rambling. She lives literally a block and a half from the office, so I don't know what she's talking about. My coworker pulls her aside and said she can't keep taking super long breaks unless she has medical problems or stomach issues. She gets it, completely understands, and apologizes. Then she takes off her blazer and reveals the worst outfit I've ever seen for work. It was a romper that somehow showed off her butt and her chest at the same time, whilst also looking dirty like she found it on the floor. She's talking like crazy and can't be quiet or focus on anything. Highlights during the few hours she was there: she stroked a patient's butt cheek and thigh because she wanted to see if her leggings felt as soft as they looked. She flirted with a man that was 70 and married, and when he didn't respond physically, she grabbed him and tried to force herself on him. She said she needed to get something from her boyfriend real quick, parked in our back lot for 30 minutes where no one could see her. When she came back from her parking lot escapades, her entire personality was mellow and dropping until she just stopped functioning. She just stared catatonically at the computer screen for 40 minutes while we discussed what to do about her. We ended up making an excuse and having the doctors tell her to leave. As she left, she went to say goodbye to one of the doctors and was slurring her words, and for some reason, at 5:30 in the evening told him, "Bye, have good mornings," and then left. She then called me multiple times at the office, sobbing because she was fired. It was uncomfortable, and I wasn't even supposed to be the one working that day. In short, filled in and ended up training a girl who was high out of her mind. Did not have good mornings after that. Well, in my manager and team leader roles, I've witnessed some pretty disastrous first days in my time, but never any as bad as this. What substance do we think she was on? Smack? That poor girl needs help in any case. I used to make custom leather accessories for motorcycles and once worked on a Saturday to catch up on special orders. A couple came in for a tank bra for the wife's bike. Turns out I knew the husband for years, and the new wife was the CPA for a development company looking for an assistant. And that's how I'm not even supposed to be here today turned into a much better paying job about 10 minutes away from home with excellent benefits. I was visiting federal prison for a community event, and after it was over, there was time to visit with the inmates. Well, me and a friend were about to leave to go and get lunch, but since my co-worker was there, I thought to invite her. She was all the way in the back of the room, but before we could make ourselves back to the door, there was a lockdown. We were stuck there, hungry and without any news, for over 2 hours. After we got out, I heard in the news that an inmate had escaped. In short, I was in a lockdown in a federal prison because I thought to invite my co-worker to lunch. Worked at McDonald's in high school. A manager called me and asked me to work a breakfast shift on Saturday morning. I figured, sure, the manager was pretty cool and I'd be out of there in a few hours. They have me taking orders and money at the back drive-through window. Car pulled up and it was this old lady. We had the strangest conversation I've had at that place, and it went, "Welcome to McDonald's, blah blah blah. I'm sure we all know how it goes." "Hello, do you know you're a virgin?" Me, who's not a virgin but have to be nice, so I said, "I am?" "Yes, I'm a virgin, you're a virgin, we're all virgins." I was getting curious now. "Okay, how do you know all of this?" "The people told me. They're all around us and they know we're virgins." "Oh well, that's good that you told me." "They had a meeting and we're going to the place for the virgins." "Oh, that's great, but you've got to order now." "Oh, I'll have a tea." She then pulled forward and proceeded to have the exact same conversation with me again at the window. Asked for the manager and told her about the new virgin vacation spot as well. It was this old lady and all the makeup she had on was hot pink. I was cast in a play, quit, and then blackmailed into coming back and doing the show by the crazy choreographer. I found out years later the director had no clue and he apologized to me. The night I came in for my first forced rehearsal, I saw a drunk guy get hit and killed by a car outside the rehearsal space. I was a small child in a stroller. My mum was rushing down the stairs and was too slow, and the doors in the front carriage closed in her face and she missed the train. A few minutes later, the train crashed. 43 people died, and most of them were from the front couple of carriages. Google the Moorgate tube crash if you want to be traumatized. What's your most insane meeting the parents story? He brought his mother on our first date. Dated a girl just for a bit, no plans at all to meet her parents at this point. We had just finished doing the deed for the first time when she got a call from her mum. Apparently, she'd had a little bit too much to drink and needed a sober ride home. This girl asked if I minded, and I didn't, so we headed to the bar to get them. They were kind enough to be outside waiting for us when we got there. The parents were both leaning back on a railing above some concrete steps leading to an outside basement entrance. This girl waves at them and they wave back. Her dad lost his balance and went backwards over the railing. Her mum looked over and just started wailing. Made her stay in the car and call 911 while I went to see what happened. He had landed just right on the corner of one of the stairs and split his skull wide open, dead before I ever said a word to him. That relationship didn't last very long. Oh, I have a good one. My husband and I are older, like in our 40s, and have been dating about a year before I met his parents for the first time. They live on the other side of the country and flew out to visit him. His ex-girlfriend found out and showed up at the restaurant, sat down and dominated the conversation with all of the memories she had with the parents and my husband. It was awkward as heck. They can't stand her but are polite people, and this chick is such a hot mess. I was invited to a former boyfriend's house for dinner to meet his parents. When I got there, his father wasn't home yet from work, so we decided to go for a walk. Boyfriend's mother told us to be back at the house by 5, so we were playfully racing each other back so as to make it in time. I got to the door a few paces ahead of him, opened the door and found myself face to face with his dad, who was standing completely undressed in front of the door. I turned around and hid around the corner, and the father kind of yelped and ran down the hall, and we were both mortified. Turns out he came home and was getting ready to shower when the phone rang, so he answered it in the buck since he hadn't expected us back yet. In short, I saw his dad au naturel before I even saw him. Well, at least you could try and get a gauge on the family genes and what you might have to work with on your boyfriend later, so it's not all bad, right? I met my ex's mum when I was 15. They were a highly Catholic family and he wasn't allowed to date, so I would go over after school until it was about time for them to get home. So we were making out and my shirt and bra come off, which was pretty escalated for us. Then we heard a car door slam. He grabs my shirt and bra, hands them to me and tells me to go hide in his closet. So I do, shirtless. His mum and him talk for what seems like forever just outside the door. She tells him she's going to go take a nap, so to be quiet. After she went into her room, he came and got me. Right as I'm trying to get my bra on, she steps out of her room and sees me. We broke up soon afterwards. In short, got caught by a super Catholic mum shirtless in her son's closet. Not so much of a story, but just before I met his mum, my ex said to me, "My mom is like a shark. She can smell fear, so just don't be scared." Oh, okay. My ex-mum surprised him with a visit while we were mid-whoopee. My clothes somehow ended up all over the apartment, so I had to come out and greet her, wearing nothing but his shirt and pretending it was a dress. She knew. Did I mention she was one of my bosses? Met the father at the boyfriend's hockey game. He was sweet and bought me a hot chocolate and himself a coffee. About 5 minutes later, he gets booted from the arena for arguing with a ref and throwing his coffee at said referee's face. His mum asked us if we were, quote, dipping winkies, please bear in mind that I'm a female, and said if he ever needed protection for us to tell her we're hungry for Hardee's, and she'd know what we meant and wouldn't have to explain further, and that she would either give us money or go out and buy us protection. I was 14 at the time. I found out years later that she became pregnant and had a termination at 13, and she didn't want us to have to make that decision, so she was really just trying to be helpful. But it was a little much for the very first time meeting her. Sitting at dinner with the girlfriend and her parents, I'd just met them 10 minutes earlier, having casual conversations when I snarted. I tried to play it cool, but we all knew what happened. The worst part was about 30 seconds after the sneeze, after everyone had moved on, when the smell crept in. Meeting my now fiancé's mum for the first time, a few months after we'd started dating. She makes a comment about us making babies, half jokingly, and I nervously reply, "It's okay, we're enjoying practicing for now." My ex-boyfriend wanted me to meet his parents, and he told me they wanted to meet me too. We decided to drive up to their place in the Bay Area. We lived in Orange County at the time. We did this for Thanksgiving. I'm white, and he and thus his parents are Chinese. I normally wouldn't mention this, but apparently my whiteness made them not approve of me, and therefore not actually want to meet me. I didn't know they didn't want to meet me, otherwise I wouldn't have driven 6 hours and showed up at their house. When we knocked on their door, his mother answered, looked at me and said in Cantonese, "I told you not to bring the white girl here." More was said in Cantonese and I understood none of it. To save money, his parents didn't have the boiler on, nor did they have heat in the house. Not having a boiler meant not having hot water and therefore not having showers. To remedy this, they had a membership at 24-Hour Fitness, where they went every night to have a shower. They insisted that we go to the 24-Hour Fitness for a shower literally 15 minutes after showing up at their house. 24-Hour Fitness has communal showering. I'm absolutely terrified of communal showering. I had to get undressed with my boyfriend's mother 15 minutes after meeting her. At that point, she had never spoken a word to me in English. The first actual communication she showed to me was to thrust a hairdryer in my hands. Anyway, the next few days were excruciatingly uncomfortable. Next to nothing was said in English at all, and I felt like everyone hated me. I spent several days just being as quiet, submissive, and polite as possible. I was sent to his mother's garden to pull weeds in the sun for a few hours, and after that, she apparently began liking me. Later in the week, she decided I needed a checkup at the doctor. For what reason, I don't know. Turns out she scheduled me for an exam of my lady parts conducted by a man who I don't know, a man who spoke in really broken English. I explained to her that I was not comfortable with any of this. It was horrible and embarrassing. In short, I got undressed with my boyfriend's mum 15 minutes after meeting her. She hated me, and later she scheduled me for a fricking pelvic exam and didn't bother explaining to me what was happening until we were there. And no, I didn't have that exam. I noped right out of there. Ouch. Yeah, I don't care how great that partner is. I think if that's happened, it's breakup time, right? There'd have to be a bombshell supermodel millionaire to make family meetings like that worthwhile. I met his mum and said, "Oh, this must be your grandmother."
See, this is why we always guess one generation down. Then it's either flattering or correct.
Her parents had an RV and were on vacation when we met. When they returned home, we were doing the deed in the shower. Her mum didn't expect anyone to be at the house with her and just walked in. We had done it everywhere in the house, and she was expecting them home the next day. Her dad introduced me to his 357 and told me to get the F out of his house. So I left. Brit here. Do American fathers actually shoot their daughters' boyfriends, or is it more of a statement? It's a stereotype, sometimes true and oftentimes not. My worst meet the parents situation was several years ago. I walked into his house and noticed framed photos on the wall. All of them were stills from when they were on the show Wife Swap. That in and of itself was no big deal until I saw the episode, but then father approached me and I stuck out my hand to shake, and he just looks me up and down, turns to his son and says, "Is she a subscriber to The Way?" And later on we were all having dinner, and his sister is telling the parents how she heard I was a working girl and they attempted to evangelize me. I went to pick her up and her mother was a parole officer. She photocopied my driver's license and made me wait around while she phoned somebody at the station to check my record. I was 16 and it was the winter formal. Her dad waved from across the room and I happened to be walking towards him and landed the most awkward high five of my life. I dated a Korean guy for a month or so in high school. I went to his house after school one day and encountered his dad on the sidewalk before we made it there. He looks at me, looks at his son, and begins pointing at me and yelling at him in Korean. I had to awkwardly stand there for about 5 minutes of them going back and forth before we parted ways and I just went home. Turns out he didn't want him dating a non-Korean. That's actually a pretty common occurrence for the people who recently migrated from Korea. The grandparents will pretty much ignore their grandchildren if something like that happens. Dating a Japanese person is the worst, though. Current boyfriend has extremely Christian and somewhat square parents. They're very sweet, albeit sheltered. So he and I have a running joke that he uses me for nothing more than as a splooge bucket. So he texts and tells me he's at his parents' house. Unbeknownst to me, he hands his iPhone to his mum to look up a brownie recipe, and at that exact moment I text him back, "Tell your parents your splooge bucket says hello," which of course popped up. She purportedly shrieked and he now has a cracked screen. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I knocked up my girlfriend. She is Vietnamese. Talking to her mum on the phone, she somehow let it slip that she was pregnant. We had to cancel all plans immediately, drive over an hour to where they are, near the older brother's house, and discuss this with them. So picture the scene. Me, a giant white guy, and them, a tiny Asian family. The scene is a kitchen table with her mum, dad, sister, brother-in-law, and the girlfriend and I. There was about an hour of unbelievably awkward discussion and arguments in Vietnamese with me just sitting there. Everything turned out alright as our boy is 2 months old, today actually, and her parents and family love me. It was like Meet the Fockers, mixed with Knocked Up and Apocalypse Now. I met my wife online back in 1995 when I was 23 and she was a 19-year-old college student. She lived 9 hours away and I had no car, so when it was my turn to visit her, I got a cheap plane ticket. She came to pick me up at the airport around midnight, but parked her car in the wrong place. We returned to her spot to find that the car had been towed away. We took a cab to the impoundment lot and discovered that they wouldn't release the car to us because her parents owned the car. My poor long-distance girlfriend had to call her parents around 1 a.m. and ask them to drive to the impound lot, which was an hour away from their house, to get her car out so the two of us could drive back to her apartment for illicit unmarried relations. When her parents arrived, I introduced myself to her dad, shook his hand, and said, "I'm sorry we couldn't have met under better circumstances," and he just grunted at me. "Well, author, you married them in the end. I figure he might have got over it in the 16 years between the incident and you writing that story in 2011. If he still bears a grudge now in 2024, then I really admire your commitment to her. At least now your relations are post-marital." I met my wife, then girlfriend's parents, once or twice before Christmas. However, I didn't really get the chance to meet the rest of her family, or really them for that matter. So when my girlfriend asked me to come over for the holidays, I thought it would be fun. Okay, something quick you have to know. My family doesn't celebrate holidays. I mean, we used to, but after a while, we just got lazy. So while we might go somewhere nice to eat on Christmas, we don't exchange gifts. And for some idiot reason, I didn't consider buying her family anything until I was an hour away from her house. Crap. So I quickly get some gifts from a shop that is surprisingly open. However, this place was just a step above a gas station. The mum got an ugly Christmas pillow and the dad got a collection of shot glasses. I gift wrap in the car and drive the rest of the way, not even realizing I forgot to get something for her brother. So I get there, put the gifts under the tree, I notice 8 gifts for me, and I try to play it cool. I seem to be making a good impression, and by the nighttime, I think I'm golden. I go to sleep with dreams of sugar plums and fairies. And frick, I'm sick. Abort. I wake up on Christmas morning projectile vomiting, all over this family quilt thing that they've put over me, and I run to the bathroom, chucking up all along the way. Lucky for me, no one woke up. I do my best to clean everything and go to bed for another hour. I wake up to Santa going round 2 to my stomach. I sit up and chuck up again. My girlfriend runs in, sees me and helps clean me up. I make her swear she won't tell anyone. I get up, take a shower, and by the time I'm out, Christmas breakfast is beginning. I make it through the breakfast, but as we sit down at the tree to open presents, I lose it again. I have never chucked up that sloppily in my entire life. I was like a fricking sprinkler during summer. Her mum screamed and jumped back, only to hit the couch wrong and topple over it. I run for the bathroom and there I am for 15 minutes. When I get back, I'm ashamed. The family cleaned up my chuck and tell me it's okay and that I should lay down. So I do. Christmas dinner is around the time I wake up. I'm sweating and shivering, and I barely remember I'm supposed to meet my girlfriend's grandparents tonight. They'd driven 5 hours to meet me. I stand up, get dizzy, and somehow end up on the floor again, where I decided to close my eyes for a few more minutes. And I crap myself. I'm not kidding. 1 minute I'm sort of zoning, and the next I feel this intense stomach cramp. Then I just do it. I crap myself. I lay there in my own number 2 for a minute as I hear the family outside laughing and spreading the cheer. They are loving the holidays and the togetherness, and I, on the other hand, am hating everything about this crappy situation. I text my girlfriend because that's all I can do. I say, "I had an accident, come in here." She comes and asks where the puke is, and I just close my eyes, take a breath, and mutter, "I crapped my pants." So my girlfriend helps me out of my pants and gets me some wipes, and I'm so fricking sick that I'm not even wiping correctly. And the entire time, my girlfriend is in and out of the room, throwing stuff away and grabbing more stuff. I hear her grandparents and parents talking about what's going on. At one point, I hear a knock on the door and it's her mum. She wants to check on me and the girlfriend screams, "Do not come in," which of course is the reason she comes in. So my girlfriend and her mother are in the room with a very sick me, trying their best to ignore the smell. Then I hear the fire alarm. The mum had forgotten to take something out of the oven because she was trying to help me. The good news is nothing was burned, but it's fun to add to the story. By the time the Christmas ham is being served, I'm back in bed, muttering my apologies. The next morning I wake up, and this is the worst part, I wake up feeling okay. So I thank everyone for the lovely time, say I have a work emergency, and bolt. Just freaking bolt. God, I hate Christmas. Wow, that sounds like a crap Christmas, pun intended. And again, you stuck around with this person after the incident, so one hopes that things with the in-laws are better now. I mean, they seemed very sweet and understanding. I'm sure it's come up many, many times since then, though. I was dating this girl for about 3 months and got her pregnant. We decided it was best if we just got married, as I was 27 and she was 20. I drove to my parents' house to tell them, and at the same time she went to her parents' house to tell them. I offered to go with her, but she said, "You don't know my dad." Which was true because while she had met my parents, I'd never met hers. Sitting at my parents' house listening to them tell me how I was throwing my life away, the phone rings. It was my girlfriend. She said I needed to go over to her parents' house because they wanted to meet me. I showed up at their house and was escorted to the living room, where I was asked to sit in a chair in the middle of the room. Her family sat in a semicircle around me and proceeded to grill me for 2 hours. What were you thinking? You're 7 years older than her. Are you some kind of pervert? How do you plan on supporting our daughter and grandchild? On and on. That was 20 years ago. I'm posting this from my in-laws' house, sitting next to my 19-year-old daughter. I'm still very much in love with my wife, and her family still hates me and sees me as the dirty old man that took their daughter away from them. I had to drive her to her mother, who was giving birth in hospital. That was when I first met her parents. Bonus points, she named the child the same name as me. The doctor said, "It's a boy." And her mum said, "I'll call him John." She then turned to her daughter. "Who's this with you?" Mom, meet John." In hindsight, I could have pretended I was her child that had traveled back from the future to witness his own birth. Frick, that would have been weird. Oh, I have a good one. It's not a relationship type meet the parents, but it is the worst experience I've had with someone's parents outside of my dysfunctional family. My friend is the son of one of the physics professors at my university, so when I got introduced to my future instructor, because I decided to major in physics, I was forced to make some small talk. He also prepared a lovely dinner for us too. I had no clue he had 3 other children in the family, so he started talking about them. We talked a lot about how his oldest was in Germany and his second oldest skipped a grade. That was my friend. I started spacing out and instead focused on the food and how good it was. At this time, he mentioned that his youngest daughter was at Girl Guides. And right when he said that, I let out the most satisfying to signify that I was really enjoying his food. I then clued back into the conversation and said, "Girl Guides, yeah, I like them," which was a mistake when I quickly realized what I'd just said after I could see my friend holding back laughter, but I just sat there and ate my food in silence. He gave me this really weird look, and I don't think he's looked at me the same since, even after being my instructor for 6 upper-level physics classes. We never spoke of it again, but my friend likes to bring it up every so often. In short, I meet my future physics professor over dinner, and his first impression of me is that I'm some creep who really enjoys Girl Guides. She only had her mother, and her father passed away when she was young. I go to her house and wait for her to get home and meet her mum. She has a bottle of Dewar's on the table. Her mum was pleasant and not too drunk at the time, and she offers me a drink. I normally don't drink the hard stuff, but I decided to be polite and take it. Her mother gets a phone call, and apparently my new girlfriend is going to be about 2 hours late. The mother sits down next to me on the couch and tells me. Then the unthinkable happens. Her mum, not very attractive by the way, puts her hand on my upper thigh. She says we have 2 hours if I'm interested, and smiles. Now at the time, I'm only 18, but I had enough common sense to get the frick out real quick. I met up with my girlfriend later on that night, and I don't even bring up what happened, because what good could it do, right? 2 days later, my girlfriend shows up at my house and is wide-eyed. Her breath is labored. She ran to my house. She tells me that one of her best friends just told her that he slept with her mum. I ask when that happened, and she said 2 nights ago. So I made the right choice. When I was 15, I met my then-girlfriend's father as he drove us home from a school dance. I had my arm around her. He asked if my arm was broken. I replied that it was not. He asked me if I wanted it to stay that way, so I removed my arm from around my girlfriend. When did you get a punishment that sounded easy but was actually horrifying? As a kid, when I did do something wrong, I'd have to write a sentence 100 to 500 times as punishment. I remember having to sit in the car at a family reunion at probably 7 years old writing, "I am a bad girl," 500 times because I'd taken a granola bar without asking. Writing, "I am a bad girl" that many times, repeated for minor infractions, and sentences like, "I am a liar and no one likes liars," or "I ruined the day for my family," just sticks with you and becomes internalized. I'm 31 now. It's been a good 15 years since I've had to write these, but I still think them about myself. Bread and water rations. It was there to cause weaponized constipation. 30 days of constant abdominal pain specifically tailored to humiliate is a lot worse than, "Oh, bland food, boo-hoo." Standing on concrete. The World War II Germans called them Stehrbunker. Stalin called them Kishka, but it's all the same idea. A cell so small you're forced to stand because there isn't enough room to sit. Standing barefoot on concrete for days is beyond brutal. It won't kill you, but it will, slowly and very painfully, cripple you while keeping you awake for days straight. Something I actually did to myself, I needed to cut weight for a wrestling tournament in a drastic way. Because of a mix-up in weight classes, I needed to drop 16 pounds overnight. I told my coaches that wasn't possible, just pull me from the roster. But my head coach pulls me aside and tells me there might be a way, and you don't even have to work out. What you do is fill up a bathtub with the hottest water you can stand and add a bag of Epsom salt and some rubbing alcohol to the water. Go into the bathroom with a buddy, stuff towels under the doors so cool air can't get in, and then get in the tub neck deep. After 60 seconds, your body will already be screaming to get out of the water because you're overheating. I stayed in for 45 minutes, adding more hot water every 2 to 3 minutes to ensure the hell never ended. The buddy is there to make sure you don't die. I sweat out 11 pounds in 45 minutes. Afterwards, I chewed some gum that's covered in citric acid that causes salivation, and I spit out the other 5 pounds over about 2 hours. So, the narrator doesn't think this seems possible, but there were many other replies to this story confirming things like this that wrestlers have endured to lose sudden amounts of weight that don't seem medically advisable to me. Teachers who recommend that high school students do this to themselves are possibly endangering their kids, surely. Insane stuff. Peeling salted sunflower seeds with your bare hands. I had the choice between that and getting my butt beaten with a cable when I screwed up big time when I was 6 years old. I chose the peeling, and I regretted that immensely. It doesn't sound bad at first, but let me tell you, after 1 hour, you just want to hold your hands in ice water. Your fingertips get sore, sometimes you prick your skin, and the salt dries out your fingernails and makes them really sensitive. Not to mention that the salt creeps up your nail bed and hurts like all hell, especially if you rip your skin near your fingernails. I never chose that punishment again. Outlawry. To be declared an outlaw. Today we think of an outlaw as just anybody who breaks the law regularly. Back in the day though, it was a punishment. If you were declared outlaw, that meant you were literally outside of the law, and could claim no protection from it. If someone didn't like you, they could freely beat you, rob you, torture you, or even kill you. When the stories refer to Robin Hood as an outlaw, that's what they're talking about. It's not a romantic, heroic, swashbuckling thing. It's the state of having no claim to any legal protection at all. The king, or whoever he appoints, takes your land, and anyone who wants it can take your stuff, and anyone who doesn't like you can just beat you to death without consequence. They can also put a bounty on your head and have people hunt you to claim it. What do you think would happen if you lost all protection from the law, and anyone who brought your head to the courthouse could claim a year's salary as a reward? Having to play with chickens. My grandpa always told me when the neighborhood kid would misbehave, this was like 100 years ago since then, his parents would lock him into the chicken habitat and put some liquid or meat on his feet. The chickens would peck at his feet and he would have to flee constantly until he was too tired to, and then he would be released. Kneeling on grains of uncooked rice. Goat licking. In medieval times, you'd get your feet strapped between 2 wooden boards and they'd be sprinkled in salt or something similar so that animals, mainly goats, would lick them. Seems like it would tickle at first, but they won't stop licking. Apparently, they'd lick the flesh off until they hit bones.
Having been licked by a cat for like a minute or so, I can imagine this is an awful torture.
Being forced to keep your arms up all the time. This was a punishment my dad enforced after bare-bottom spankings stopped working. To get out of those, I would laugh even though they hurt like heck because I knew he'd get angry and stop. I'd have to stand against a wall with my hands in the air for hours, and if they moved down, the punishment would get longer. My dad told me about a punishment that was given in schools when he was growing up. He was born in 1954, which was when you had to go to the side of the aisle of desks and squat down into the Asian or Russian squat stance, and then hold it for the rest of the class. He said it never sounded bad, but after a while your muscles and knees would lock up, and at the end of the class, in order to get out of the position, you had to fall onto your side or back to the floor to let your legs relax enough to allow you to move and use them. He told me when I was super young, but it's always stuck with me because I was so surprised that something so seemingly small would cause so much pain and loss of control. You essentially got insane Charlie horses when you dropped out of the position. You shouldn't be happy with getting away with a crime by pleading insanity. Instead of a time-definite custodial sentence, you get an indefinite custodial sentence in an underfunded and terrifying medical facility. Maybe for the rest of your life. Yay! Tickling. No joke, the Germans used this in World War II as a form of torture in some cases. It doesn't leave a mark, so it's also used in environments like mental facilities, where patients may be restrained and staff go on a power trip. Extreme cases can result in incontinence, vomiting, and a loss of consciousness due to the inability to breathe. It's also easier for the torturer to do it for a long time without it wearing away at their conscience because the victim is involuntarily laughing, so it's easy to pretend it's not that bad. Being ignored or ostracized. It might not sound like much, but as humans we need that social contact, and leave it too long, and it becomes incredibly damaging. I hate being confused for an ostrich as well, but it's very much damaging to my self-esteem, as I'm so sensitive about my big pointy nose and my knobbly knees. Jokes aside, yeah, being socially alone is a really underrated grim punishment of life. Listening to the same song on loop, then skipping parts of the song. This was a form of torture used by the CIA, and it's absolutely awful. Closing your hand around a chunk of saltwater ice and holding it there. Dubbed the Salt and Ice Challenge, where people would hold on to it for as long as they can stand, it can lead to frostbite injuries similar to second- and third-degree burns. It also essentially fuses to your skin, so if you try to open your hand, it will rip off your skin. You need to use warm water to detach it. I did this about 20 years ago before it was a thing on social media. It sucks. With the attention this is getting, I feel obligated to say definitely do not try this. Isolation. There's a reason solitary confinement is considered a form of torture. The human mind isn't designed to function in an environment devoid of stimulation or social interaction. It was cool going to Alcatraz and doing the audio tour, actually. You get to go into one of the solitary confinement cells with the doors closed behind you, and it's pitch black, and while you're in there, you hear stories from inmates, dramatically read, about what it was like and how some of them would focus their mind until they could see a tiny speck, and within that they could conjure an imaginary television screen and see moving images. It helped them to stop going crazy. Standing at parade rest without being able to talk for 5 hours. In basic training, someone got caught stealing food from the DFAC no more than 20 minutes after we'd been yelled at for people doing that. As a punishment, we stood at parade rest from 5 p.m. to 10 p.m. without being able to talk and with at least one DS watching us at all times. I don't know how to describe it, but your brain can only come up with so much to do for 5 hours while not moving. Oh, we had a guy purposefully lock his knees so he'd pass out. Apparently there are clever ways to get out of some of these punishments. I can't remember what country used it, Russia or Japan I think, but one punishment was genuinely known as the white. You'd be given white clothes, locked in a cell with white walls, with no windows and a completely white door. You'd get a light bulb on a white fixture but no light shade. Your bed and its linens would also be white, and you'd be fed exclusively on white rice, in a white bowl with white cutlery, and to drink you'd get water in a white cup. After a day or two you'd begin to hallucinate because of the lack of visual stimulation. Chinese water drop torture. Victims were strapped down so that they couldn't move, and cold or warm water was then dripped slowly to a small area of the body, usually the forehead. The forehead was found to be the most suitable point for this form of torture because of its sensitivity. Prisoners could see each drop coming, and after long durations they were gradually driven frantic as a perceived hollow would form in the center of their foreheads. You're sort of right. They were blindfolded and leaned back. You were also restrained and maybe had earplugs or rags stuffed in your ears. They removed all other senses. They'd also vary the rate of the drops. The torture comes in when you throw off their sense of time. They have no idea when to expect the next drop. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. Painting rocks. A couple of guys in my AITA unit got in trouble, and the sadistic drill sergeant tried being creative with an approved punishment, which was painting rocks. As dumb a punishment as it is, the sadistic side was that this training unit was in southern Arizona during peak summer temperatures. The rocks were literally hot enough to fry an egg on, and both privates' hands ended up being covered with second-degree burns. The drill sergeant faced pretty heavy administrative action. I don't recall exactly what, but it was probably one of the most severe I've ever heard a drill sergeant receive. Waterboarding. If any of you kids don't know, there was this big debate back in the early 2000s. Some people were calling it torture, and others were more or less like, "It's literally just pouring water on someone's face. What's the big deal?" Now, when you put it like that, yeah, what's a big deal? Take someone, make them lay down, and hold them down so they can't move, then pour water on their face. What's the big deal? I remember one conservative radio host got the bright idea to prove live and on the air that it's not as bad as they're saying by having his staff waterboard him on air. And you know what? I respect the guy for doing this. He had a strongly held belief and he was willing to go through it to try and prove his point. He lasted all of 15 seconds before he tapped out of it, hacked and coughed for about 5 seconds, and finally managed to say, "Definitely torture," before suggesting they take a break so he could recover from that. Good on him for admitting that he was wrong. It gives the narrator a good chuckle to think about the other listeners who presumably were already minds made up that they agreed with his first point of view, and you've got to wonder whether that changed any of their minds. Most people are so entrenched about this sort of thing. When visiting Africa, we learned that some places have their own form of lethal injection for criminals, by snakebite. Committers of the unspeakable act and murderers would be forced to receive a bite on both ankles from a puff adder. After officials verified the bites, they'd be sent home, under supervision, to spend their last days with their family. Some people thought it sounded like a more humane form, but it's not. When I was around 10 years old, being forced to stand in the corner of the living room with my parents and siblings in the room and stare at the wall for hours. Kneeling in salt. When I was 16, my mother told me that if I kept my attitude up, I'd be kneeling in salt. Being a dumb kid, I was like, oh whatever, it's just salt. Well, I kept that attitude up and my mum sprinkled a light dusting of salt on the tile floor in the kitchen, and I had to kneel in salt for an hour. The grains cut my knees and burned the wounds. I'm 32 now and I still have scars on my knees. I will add this before the replies come in. I know that this was not good parenting. My mum was pregnant at the time and not in a good place mentally. My sister is now 16 and has never even had as much as a slap. Just recently, my sister told me she thinks I was just a bad kid if mum did all of that to me. I told my mother about the conversation afterwards, and my mother said, "You weren't a bad kid, none of you were. I just had a temper and I didn't know how to control it." I'll admit I'm an adult now and with 2 kids of my own, and hearing her say that made me cry on the way home. I knew in my head I wasn't a bad child. I rarely got into trouble, never did substances, I just had an attitude. But I hadn't realized how heavy my heart was from the punishments. I was the first of 3 kids, I got the worst of it, and I always blamed myself. Even when I was finally over it and rebuilt a relationship with my mum, I blamed myself. I hadn't realized how much I needed to hear her say that until she did. This was 3 weeks ago, and I'm tearing up just typing this. My cousin, at 10 years old, quite agile, never sits still. Once he troubled my aunt so much that she punished him. His punishment was to sit still on the bed and do nothing. No TV, no playing either on the phone or with his toys, not even speaking. No one was allowed to come to his room so that he can't even watch others. He asked her if he could read his textbooks as he thought studying would lessen her anger, but she denied him even doing that. He had to sit completely still. Initially, that punishment seemed quite simple to me, but what impact it had on this small child was huge. This punishment tortures you by boring you, which a small child can't take. At last, he broke down crying, after which he was pardoned. Okay, I'm stretching the definition of a light punishment here by a long way, but when I heard of death by 1,000 cuts, I thought it would be someone giving you a bunch of cuts until you bled out. Painful, a bit extreme, but the reality is actually much worse. It turns out cuts is a bit of a mistranslation, and it should really be slices. The executioner slices big chunks off your body systematically, up to muscles and whole limbs, with the aim of keeping you alive as long as possible. There are a handful of pictures of the process being done, which are just about the most horrific things I've ever seen. It's kind of lost its sting from popular overexposure, but crucifixion is one of the most agonizing deaths humankind has ever come up with. Just the muscle cramps alone from staying in one position for hours is enough to put it in the running, and the constant near strangulation, competing with the pain from the nails, is probably the main draw. The white room punishment. Everything white, tasteless, no sound, room temperature kept at body temperature, if I remember correctly, just a bed, toilet, water and food, nothing that could be used in any way to alleviate the boredom. It doesn't seem that big at first, just nothing to do for a while, but it's in truth some of the worst torture one can experience. Famine walls. This was something I'd never heard of until I took a trip to Ireland and saw them firsthand. These were famine walls, and they were built during the famine of the 1840s as a means to keep the hungry masses out of the estates of the landowners. We learned it was the usually homeless Catholics who built the walls, for a few scraps to eat. According to our guide, massively, largely pointless work projects like the famine walls and the famine roads kept the masses barely alive during the 4 years that the potato crop failed. The British rule had proclaimed that the poor had to work for sustenance and not be given charity or allowed to beg. Just think about how demoralizing this would be. Day after day, building stone walls with zero purpose just to earn your bread and soup for the day. The shocking thing is the scope of the famine walls. They're literally everywhere on the countryside as far as you can see. It's really insane just how horrifically a lot of Ireland was decimated by the English in the last couple of centuries, and how little of that is present at face value in British schooling on the old empire. They're starting to come to terms with what they did in their more distant colonies, but just how much they mistreated and massacred their Western neighbours really doesn't seem to get around much in your average Brit's education from what I've seen. That farm pit punishment they used to use in Eastern Europe, where the criminal is made to stand in a pit on a hog farm for a day, which starts out empty, but then the hog manure pours in with them as the hogs produce it. I'm always shocked by the number of people who consider it better than jail when it's brought up just because it's only a day. That sounds similar to the chicken poop prison in Thailand. You'd end up with severe respiratory illness due to the ammonia. People rarely survived a month, and former inmates were left with chronic lung disease and PTSD. Your mum saying she's not mad at you, just disappointed. My dad is the king of cruel and unusual punishments. He forced me and my brother to drink pint after pint of water without allowing us to use the toilet. Made me run up and down stairs when I was 9 for hours on end until I confessed to something I didn't do. Doesn't sound bad until you actually do it. My friend once proposed a punishment for people who mistreat animals, sort of as a joke. They'd be locked in a small cell for a few days, which is then pumped full of the heavy smell of dog breath. Apparently, most people, including me, thought that sounded very light for the crime, until asked to actually visualize it. When I did, I literally gagged at the thought. Having bamboo shoots grow beneath you while tied down. In my home country, the penalty for the unspeakable act and substance trafficking is whipping, with no limit, a specific number to be set by the judge. First, they clinically clear you for the punishment. Then they get you in a bent-over pose while your butt is visible through a wooden frame. The torturer, a man in a legitimate black hood, shows up and dips a horsewhip in medicine. The medicine serves two purposes. Firstly, it helps with slight healing during the whipping, in order to allow the prisoner more lashes during that sitting. And secondly, because the medicine is sticky, it causes the whip to stick and tear flesh from the butt whenever it cracks. My teenaged cousin wanted a government or town summer job where he could work out and work on his tan all day. My uncle was angry at him for thinking all government jobs were cushy, sit on your butt kinda do nothing things. So for him, he found him a job as a gravedigger in a local cemetery. He was in the sun all day and got tons of exercise. Wrapping your fingers tightly with a thinner duct tape or anything string-like but with an adhesive for minutes, with the tip of the fingers left out. Restricting any blood flow to the tips of your fingers isn't child's play, provided you're restrained and can't do anything with the pain. Stings like heck. Parents should not make their kids eat soap for saying a bad word. It's really horrible for them. Usually the kids picked up the word from the parents, and even if they didn't, it's needlessly cruel. Silent treatment and stonewalling, especially coming from a loved one. It creates a terrible imbalance in the relationship and serious psychological trauma on the stonewalled individual. No one should ever choose this method to punish the other. Buck ragging for kids. Making a kid breathe in buck or male deer urine on a rag. It smells so bad. Everyone I knew as a kid who received it said it was their most feared punishment. Everyone who didn't said it's just a gross rag. How could 5 minutes of that be bad? Your teacher shaming you in front of all of your classmates for giving a wrong answer. When did someone try a crazy or cringe pickup on you? Let me start my story by stating the fact that I am very, very pregnant. I am so hugely and obviously pregante that people feel the need to approach me in public and offer their condolences for how pregnant I am. I'm not kidding. Men and women alike have stopped me just to say, "You poor thing, I'm so sorry. You look miserable." That's how purgent I happen to be at the moment. That being said, my favorite place to be in the entire world is in a pool. Swimming makes me feel like a normal human being. The swelling in my hands and feet goes down, the pressure on my hips vanishes, my belly button goes back to being an innie. It's wonderful. Anyway, last weekend my friend texts me and asks if I'm up for a swim. I certainly am up for a swim. However, it's a little after 8:30 and my condo's pool closes at 9. We decide to go to the pool at her apartment complex as it's open until 10. We make our way out to the pool, where the only occupant is a middle-aged guy wearing a swim cap and goggles. I don't pay him any mind, I just figure it's a resident doing some evening laps. No big deal. He watches us get in the pool and says something I can't make out. I ask him to repeat himself and he just says, "I'll swim over there." Okay. So my friend and I start chatting about nothing in particular, and Mr. Swimcap starts awkwardly butting into our conversation. He wasn't trying to add to it, he would just ask random questions, only we couldn't make out what he was trying to say. So we kind of brushed him off, and he started swimming around the pool and keeps accidentally swimming into us. Keep in mind, he's wearing goggles. So we move to another part of the pool and try to act like nothing's happening. He stops trying to swim into us and just starts staring at us. Then he says something, and the conversation goes as follows. "Who wanna date?" I say, "What? Who wanna go date?" "Dude, I can't understand what you're trying to say." "Would you want to go on a date?" I pause. "Are you talking to me or her?" And I motion towards my non-pregnant friend. You. I think you're really attractive. Do you want a date?" No, I'm very flattered, but no thank you." "So you don't want a date?" No, I don't want to go on a date with you." "You have a man?" "Yeah, I have a man. We're fixing to have a baby." "Do you live together?" "Yes, we do." "So you don't want to go on a date?" "No. Dude, no, I don't want to go on a date with you." "But would you?" "Would I what?" "Go on a date with me. I think you're a really attractive person." "No, I'm done talking to you now. Please leave us alone." I go back to my friend and we start discussing exit strategies, as the guy continues to talk to himself. Luckily, my friend's male neighbor decided to come and hang out for a bit, and Mr. Swimcap starts ranting at the neighbor about who knows what. Mortgage companies, maybe. So we try to enjoy the remainder of our time in the pool. A little while later, the security guard comes by to lock up. My friend, her neighbor, and I bolt out of there while Mr. Swimcap is gathering his things. Good guy neighbor walks me to my car to ensure there are no creepers lurking about. Look. There are pregnant women who are single, attractive, and who might be very receptive to going on dates. But it's a real big swing to ask them, and you've got to learn to take no for an answer no matter what you're into. And I do kind of wonder whether this guy was specifically interested in her because she was pagante, or whether he thought literally any woman dating him was a win at that point and that her standards for some reason might be lower because she was permanent. In any case, weird messed up dude. Gave a speech for a class once, and after my speech ended, I went to take a leak and get a drink. On the way back to class, a cute Asian girl from the class was in the hall, looking like she was waiting for someone. I assumed her boyfriend, since he was also in the class with us. She saw me and lit up and asked if I wanted to join her for a cig. I don't smoke, but I obliged to keep her company since other people's speeches suck, and we headed outside. We joked around a bit, she tried flirting, but I have a girlfriend and didn't reciprocate. Figured she was just a bubbly person. Right when we were about to head back, she hands me a slip of paper with her number and says, "You should give me a call later today. We can get high and get to know each other better." I ask about her boyfriend and she says, "He's working later." I of course politely declined, went back to class, and spent the rest of the day wondering why the scenarios straight from the script of an adult movie always happen when I'm in happy, committed relationships, but never when I'm single. When we got back to class, she gave her boyfriend a peck on the cheek and sat back down next to him. I was walking down the street in the middle of December, hands stuffed in my pea coat, walking behind a young man who looks pretty paranoid. He finally stops and asks, Do you have a piece?" I pull my hands out of my pocket and shrug. "Nope, no weapon." "Oh, do you have any green herb?" "Nope, dude, sorry." "Oh, do you have a boyfriend?" Priorities, man. Priorities. I was walking down a street in Berkeley, often lined with older homeless guys and panhandlers. It was a warm day, so I was wearing a cute but modest black and white polka dot 50s style dress that always got me a lot of attention from the men. Anyways, walking by two older guys sitting on the sidewalk near each other, but far away enough not to encroach on each other's change-seeking turfs, when the first one I pass hollers something to the effect of, "Hey girl, let me see that dress on my bedroom floor." Ironic because, well, you know. To which the second homeless guy responds, without missing a beat, "Hey, don't you talk to my wife that way. She's a lady." In short, random Berkeley bum defended my honor. I was arrested in high school for a spontaneous bout of stupidity, and as I got into the cop car, I realized that there was a teenager doing a ride-along with the cop. I don't think much of it, seeing as that, I was pretty busy focusing on how much trouble I was going to be in. A few days later, as I settled into my permanent grounding, I got on Facebook. Lo and behold, I have a Facebook message. The boy doing the ride-along with the cop had written down my contact information and found me on Facebook just so that he could send me, "Hey girl, I just wanted you to know that I hated arresting a woman as beautiful as you." I was walking down the street with my mother. As it was summertime, I was in shorts and platform sandals, which were in fashion at the time. I walked by two guys, and one of them starts telling me he loves me and he wanted to go out with me. My mum asks him if he was crazy, to which he replied, "I'm crazy for her. I was 9. I was hanging out with a friend the day before Easter. She had to drop by another friend's house for a quick errand, so I went with her. They had an Easter party going on for this woman's children and a few of her friends. The parents were having a barbecue, and the kids had done an Easter egg hunt and moved on to painting pictures for their parents. A normal enough fellow started chatting with me, and after about 10 minutes with the group, I realized he was there with his 2-year-old and the baby's mum. I wasn't sure if they were together, but I just assumed they were and left it at that. So when we went to leave, I was totally taken aback when he pulled me from the doorway where everyone was saying goodbye to each other. He shook my hand and whispered, "Shh, it was so great to meet you. Shh." He put his finger to his lips, winked, and then turned me back around to face the group. I just stumbled through my normal goodbyes and left without acknowledging him. While walking away, I unfolded what had slipped me while shaking my hand. It was his number and a note that said, "You're cute. Text me," torn from a large chunk of the Easter painting his child had proudly handed him 10 minutes before. In short, Father of the Year destroys his child's masterpiece to hit on me in broken English, in front of his baby mama. Quality bloke. I wonder if she took him up on his offer. Oh, whoops. Guess she just threw that number into the trash can in the same kitchen that it was handed to her next to. What are the chances? Walking down the main street of a medium-sized town with my girlfriend and her sister. An all-right guy in an all-right-looking car, maybe about 22 to 25, pulls up and shouts to the sister, "Hey, you in the blue, come get in the car, go with me." They were married 4 months later. Last I heard, it was still going strong, but that's been a while. I didn't say anything at the time because I thought she knew the guy, and later I was annoyed at her. "I'm pretty sure she's messing with you and she knew him somehow." My parents were walking through Target when this stumpy guy walks up to my mum. He says, "Sugar zero, sugar zero, sugar zero." Mum laughs and asks him what he means, and the guy goes, If anyone asks, you can tell them that I whispered sweet nothings to you. My dad was laughing too hard to care. In short, Mum got told sweet nothings by a gnome. I have very, very long hair. It reaches below my knees. If it helps you visualize, I'm a slim Asian female. Damn, girl, your hair be crazy, like a motherfucking horsetail. Hey, you should know I'm a total stallion, babe. This guy leans in really close and starts stroking it. I get the frick out of there as fast as possible. He calls after me in a gruff plead, "Aw, come on, girl, let me see if all your hair be that long and beautiful." I briskly walk away, but not before I hear him turn back towards a buddy and swear. He thinks I've got a crazy long bush? I've also just had a guy grab my chest out of nowhere. I punched him on the ear. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I got a new job teaching computer courses to adult classes of adult learners. I go to check out an apartment I found on Craigslist near my new job. The renter and I exchange some emails. I tell her about my job and she tells me about the nutrition supplement she sells. She also tells me entirely too much about her life, her ex-husband, and her custody battle over her 13-year-old son. Boundary issues. Got it. But I respond very sympathetically towards her because I'm a people pleaser with my own boundary issues. We hit it off. The address is a house and I figure it must be a duplex of some sort. The renter invites me in. She's a 40-something-year-old woman, fairly attractive, and I'm in my early 20s at the time. She introduces me to her son, who's in the living room playing Guitar Hero. Then she shows me the room, which is just off the living room, separated by a curtain. I tell her I'm surprised, I thought she'd listed an apartment. No, she explains, it's just the room, but it comes furnished with the dresser and this waterbed. Don't worry about the curtain, she says, you'll have plenty of privacy. You just need to turn this fan on. She turns the fan on. She sits on the bed and asks me if I like waterbeds. I tell her I've never been on one. She invites me onto the bed with her. I demur, she cajoles, and promises me it will be fun. I don't get hit on much. I'm a good-looking guy but quiet, and I'm just not used to having signals sent my way. But at this point, I put it together that she's inviting me to engage in hanky-panky, while her son is 15 feet away, on the other side of a curtain. I'll admit, I was interested despite my common sense, but common sense did win the day. I get out of there as quickly as possible and tell her I'll have to think about the room situation. Epilogue, the next week, guess who shows up at my level 1 Windows Vista class? And guess who pretended he'd never seen her before in his life? This guy. It seems like you definitely should have gone through with it to avoid that social situation, dear commenter. But in all seriousness, that is an awkward proposition, especially with her offspring in listening distance. I was waiting for the last train from Paris to go back to my good old suburbs. So this is right after midnight. The station was quite empty, only a few people left around. I should probably mention that I'm a girl and alone. Anyway, I have about 15 minutes left to wait, and this old guy just comes and sits next to me. After a few minutes, he gets the courage to ask me, "Could I ask you a favor?" "Sure." "Oh, never mind, it's okay." He looked really sad and miserable about something, so I tried to be nice and insist, thinking he's just going to want to talk about something. Could I see your feet?" "Excuse me?" "I think you have beautiful feet. Could I just see them? I won't touch or anything. I just want to look. You can keep your socks on if you want." At that point, I'm quite weirded out. I was wearing some Converse, and this guy was making me feel bad for telling him I don't want to show him my feet. He kept insisting with this miserable look on his face. He even suggested to get on the next train, and if there's too many people, I don't have to if I'm being shy or something. I actually felt like I had to apologize to him because I didn't want to show him my feet. In short, I apologized to a creeper who wanted to see my feet. As a bonus, on the same night, I got off the train and walking towards my dad's car, waiting for me, another car drops their window and someone mumbles at me, "Hey, what's your name?" At which I'm too tired to think and mechanically reply like they're asking something from me. "Sorry, I don't have a name." I felt embarrassed at the time about being so dumb, but it turns out it's a quite funny way to get rid of weirdos. So I witnessed this at a bar one night. This was at a college bar in California. Anyways, this young couple were sitting at the table next to mine, and it was apparent they were dating, holding hands, smiling at each other constantly, among other things, and were minding their own business when out of nowhere a guy in his early 20s and clearly a bit drunk walks up to their table and looks at the girl for a second, then glances at the guy and says, "Hey guy, mind if I talk to your sister?" Well, hearing this, I look over at the boyfriend and he has this look on his face that just screams, "What the frick?" So here's how the rest of the conversation goes. Boyfriend says, "She's my girlfriend, man, so yeah, I mind."
"You're dating your sister? Isn't that illegal?"
"No, she's not my sister, she's my girlfriend."
"Oh, so she was your sister and now she's your girlfriend."
"No, leave us alone, kid." At this point, the drunk guy turns around and yells for his friend to come over. "Hey, come over here, this guy's dating his sister." So the next thing I know, this well-groomed and dressed guy, clearly gay, comes over to the table to see what kind of trouble his buddy is getting into. He's dating his frickin' sister.
"Isn't that illegal?"
"That's what I said." Well, now the couple are pretty annoyed and the girl suggests to her boyfriend that they go somewhere else. As they gather their things and start to walk away, the second guy walks up to the girl and says,
"Hey, would you mind if I talk to your brother?"
And this look of horror spreads across her face as she realizes the gay guy wants to talk to her man. They basically ran out of the bar and the two guys busted up laughing from the reaction they got. In short, mind if I talk to your sister?
I'm trying to figure out which one was the wingman.
I was in the back seat of my friend's truck with a girl I just met riding home one day. I make small talk, maybe 2 minutes of pleasantries are exchanged. Throughout the ordeal, I'm totally enthusiastic and just the embodiment of suave. I ask her, "Do you have a boyfriend?"
"No."
"Do you want one?"
"Oh, you're serious?"
"Yeah, babe."
"Sure."
I'll never be that cool again. Keep in mind, I'm normally fairly shy around new people. In short, I felt like Fabio. I think this might be one of the rare instances the narrator has read about where that level of boldness, in the company of other friends no less, has actually worked out for the better and not in a humiliating rejection. Then again, the rejection stories are the ones that are generally the juiciest, according to your comments, you disaster-craving weirdos. No judgment, they're more fun for me to read too. My mum was working at her pharmacy job at the pickup counter when a man came up to her and gave her a pickup line something along the lines of, "Hey, I'm not here to pick up medicine, I'm here to pick you up." That man is my father. There used to be this veteran who went to my college and always wore his uniform, and he used to hit on me in the creepiest ways until I reported his butt. It started off just as friendly banter every once in a while, until one night he has me cornered alone in the bus shelter. "I bet you taste good, little princess, like cotton candy." I walked down to the next bus stop. I was riding my bike and got hit by a car. The guy stopped and we exchanged information. I got a call later and it's him asking me if I was alright, which I thought was normal and nice of him, but then he follows it up with if I'd want to get lunch with him. He then proceeded to call me every day, leaving messages like, "You want to get lunch? I'm really hungry." You don't break a person's tailbone and then ask them out. When I'm drunk, I always seem to want to hit on lesbians. I always have a very good time too, and I've gotten a few numbers, but it's not like I was trying to convert them or something, so I always wake up the next morning wondering what the frick I was trying to pull. I made a few good friends that way though. My girlfriend and I were walking along the beach in San Diego last year. An older gentleman, probably late 50s or so, came up to me and said, "Son, if I had your body and my money, I'd be unstoppable. How about we put the two of them together?" My girlfriend just about fell over laughing while I tried to politely decline. As we walked away, he let me know, "You're even more fine watching from behind." I still haven't lived that one down. I was walking back to my car one night and a group of young guys were hanging out on the sidewalk, taking up most of the width of it. My friend and I had to walk through their group. As we walked through, a guy stepped in really close to me and whispered, "Girl, I'll buy you Starbucks every night." I had no idea how to respond, so I just smiled and kept walking. But later, I had to wonder, do non-white men think that the way to a preppy-ish looking white woman's heart is the promise of Starbucks runs? Because, well, he's kind of right, I guess. This isn't mine, as I've never been hit on, but when I was going to college, I was sitting in the cafeteria with a group of about 11 people who all knew each other and were D&D nerds together. There were 4 very attractive girls in this group. One kind of sweat-smelling, mouth-breathing, newish guy who'd only recently joined our little group leans over to one of the girls in the group and brags about how he can do a perfect Zap Brannigan impersonation. She asks to see and he goes, "If I said you had a beautiful body, would you take your pants off and dance around a little?" in Zap's voice. We laugh in that awkward, not sure if he's an unspeakable act offender way, and I have to leave for class. The next day, he gets to the table before the girl from earlier does, strikes a heroic pose and says, "Kipf, I've made it with a woman. Inform the men." The girl is mortified that he not only told everyone, but told everyone in Zap Brannigan's voice. Fortunately, he had the good sense to be too embarrassed to show his face again after that. In short, Zap Brannigan's pickup lines apparently work. I was at a beach with 3 other friends. It was a weekday, so there wasn't a crowd, but a bearable amount of people to handle. We were enjoying ourselves, and my friend and I were just floating about and talking, when I then noticed this tan guy not too far away from us. He was staring straight at us with an extremely creepy, perverted grin. We decided to swim back to shore and started to take pictures, and guess who decides to come along? Creepy tanned guy. At this point, we still haven't really reacted, but then he starts running back and forth on the beach, never taking his eyes away from me and my group. He eventually starts doing his little running routine closer and closer to us. When we thought it couldn't get weirder than that, it did. Every time he ran towards us, he slowed down, eyed us up and down, then smiled his creepy smile and began chanting. He was chanting actual gibberish, no English words or any language you would recognize. It was like he was performing a frickin' ritual on us. It was creepy as heck. In short, creepy dark tan guy tried to hit on me and my friends using some mystic ritual at the beach. What is the most messed up bombshell someone has dropped into a casual conversation with you? One year at the cottage, we met a family who was renting a cottage across the bay for the weekend, which consisted of a mum, dad, a 25-ish-year-old sister, and a younger sister who was maybe around 7 or 8. One afternoon, the parents decided to tell my mum that the older sister is actually the younger sister's mother, but they're raising her to believe that they are her biological parents. I can't imagine this stayed secret for much longer, seeing as they'd told my mum after speaking to her for maybe about half an hour. We were visiting my mother's house and sitting down for a family dinner once with my siblings and significant others, about 8 of us in total. My brother, who's significantly younger than I am, was about 14 at the time. There was a silent moment, the kind where you can hear the sound of chewing, and my mother obviously wasn't comfortable with it, so she casually mentioned, "I walked in on him tickling his pickle last week." Chaos ensued. I had a female friend over, and there were about 3 of us sitting around on the couch drinking some beers. Then she drops the, "So, I lost a baby on Sunday" bomb. "Yeah, I didn't even know I was pregnant. Anyone want another beer?" I have an old friend who tends to drop these kinds of bombshells. She's had a hard life and hates to whine about it, but deep down she really needs to talk about these things sometimes. I think it's her way of keeping us updated about her life without feeling like she's a complainer. She's utterly not a complainer, which we tell her as much as possible, but she went through a lot of rough treatment as a kid, and is still dealing with a lot of it. When we were talking about one of my mum's uncles, she casually dropped the fact that he was a serial committer of the unspeakable act, of the worst kind. Jaws were dropped. Hungover at my college's cafeteria, eating breakfast and making obligatory small talk with a girl from Iowa. Somehow, the topic of crystal, the substance from Breaking Bad, came up. I know, right? What could go wrong with this topic? So I'm saying, yeah, it's a pretty rampant problem. I read a book about it that focused on a city in Iowa, actually. People just boost these big tanks of anhydrous ammonia from farmers. She says, "Oh yeah, my dad used to be a sheriff in Iowa." "Oh, cool." "Yeah, one time he tried to close the lid on a huge anhydrous ammonia tank that was leaking." "Oh wow." "But he fell in when he was crossing the ladder." "Oh," with about a 5-second pause after that, before, "Is he alright?" "No, the acid ate him to the bone. He's dead." "Oh, well, prick." Another pause, and then I resumed my cereal. Yeah, I mean, what do you even say to continue that conversation? I think there's a much younger version of me that would be fascinated by the state of the body, but now that is not what I want to hear over breakfast. Or at all, really. My gosh. I used to work at a restaurant, and one day during pre-shift, we were casually talking and someone mentions choking someone else as a joking threat. My very hot manager says, "I like to be choked." Realizing what she said, she then stayed in her office for most of the day. I picked up a homeless guy on the interstate on the way back from Kansas City to St. Louis. He seemed really nice and had a lot of words of wisdom. He gave me some interesting insight on women and how to stay positive during the rough times. Later, he asked me if I lived in downtown St. Louis. No, I live in Clayton. I can drop you off around there or somewhere before. He responds, "Just don't drop me off downtown with all the N-words." And then, I swear on my life, he pulled out a big knife and showed me how he would stab an N-word if I dropped him off down there. At the next gas station, he went inside to take a leak, and I pretended to start filling up the car. Once he was out of sight, I popped the trunk, threw out both of his duffel bags on the ground, and peeled out of there. The whole escape probably took less than 8 seconds. One night I was talking to a friend of mine that I've known for years, and he drops the biggest what the frick bomb that I've ever heard. He told me that when he was 16, one morning he woke up and didn't remember anything. And by anything, I mean he wasn't even able to recognize his parents or girlfriend. The most shocking thing is that he never recovered the memory. He actually doesn't remember anything that happened to him before he was 16. I proceeded to talk with him for hours, asking questions like how it was to wake up one day and have a brand new life. It was messed up and extremely interesting as a conversation. He remembered all school notions, but forgot every person, every personal experience, and even how his own city looked like. He had to study a map of the city to get oriented to go around in places. I was at my friend's house on the last day of winter break, helping him pack his college stuff to go back to school. His mum walked through the doorway and looked at the piles of books, computer stuff, among other things, and had this expression of, "What the frick are you doing?" And after this long, awkward stare, she goes, "Oh, I guess no one told you. Your dad lost his job and you're not going back to college this semester." I was once having a drunken patio conversation with some buddies, and we were discussing stupid and annoying things. It was a random conversation about dumb crap, and we were having a laugh until one of my friends busts this out. "Don't you guys hate it when you're taking a crap and it grazes the back of your ball bag?" Everyone else had a long moment of silence. Another friend, after the moment of silence, "Dude, how big is your ball bag?" I recently caught up with someone I knew from my high school days, and we were catching up for dinner. After a few drinks, we get to talking about her husband. And that's when she drops the "what the frick" bomb. "Yeah, it's been hard for him and I, but once he gets out of jail, things will be better." Jail? You never mentioned that. What's he in for? "Well, remember how I said he cheated on me once? Well, that's why he's in jail." I stared at her. He got a down-under kiss from a guy with Down syndrome, which is considered illegal in his state, because the guy was not considered mentally an adult. I started mentally planning an escape route. I was hitchhiking and was picked up by a guy who had just caught his adopted 8-year-old son trying on his adopted infant son's diapers. He didn't know what to do or say, so he got in his van and just started driving. He had picked me up simply because he needed to tell someone. I mean, this isn't so bad. Kids do weird stuff. I'm sure the older one was just curious. Doing the deed with some girl out of pity, as she was going through AA. She casually mentions she'd think it were hot if I were to cut off her head and screw it. I really try hard to dismiss this and laugh it off. Then she goes, "No, I'm serious. I've done it with a dead body before. This guy I was riding OD'd on smack, and I just kept going. It was really hot." I was at a Jack in the Box drive-thru, and the man and woman in the car in front of me were yelling at each other quite loudly, so I'd begun to eavesdrop. When he got up front to order, it went something like this: "I need a number 4 combo, a number 3 combo, and a mother-fricking divorce, and a strawberry milkshake." She started yelling, and I started laughing. I swear that if the clerk didn't ask if that dad wanted fries with that, he or she will be kicking themselves on their deathbed for the missed opportunity. I was driving along with my dad when I was about 6, in 1982. We were chatting about civil rights because one of my classmates was the very first black student at my elementary school. My dad was telling me about how the South is very racist, but most of the world isn't like Pennsylvania where he's from. He tells me about his friend in the service in Biloxi, LA, and how they were such good friends, did everything together, even went to ladies of the night together. But in Biloxi, the local lady wouldn't see his friend because he was black, so Dad said, You're too ignorant even for a working girl," and refused to see her as well. So this whole time I was just sitting listening quietly, being a 6-year-old girl with 2 little blonde braids and a missing tooth. And Dad slowly turns and looks at me, and I said, "A working girl?" And Dad said, "Well, I was in the military, and that's just what you do in the military." On my first day of work at a shoe store, the manager walked around and introduced me to the other employees that came in that day. That was maybe about 2 other people. The last one of the night was an old, short woman named Joanne. As soon as she sees the manager, she walks up to her and tells us that her husband has found her toys and tried to throw them out. My manager says to me, Joanne collects Barbie dolls. And Joanne looks at her and says, "No, my other toys." Giving a coworker and her boyfriend a ride home, and she starts screaming at me to take a different exit off the highway because there's a police car on the off-ramp. Turns out they have a restraining order against each other because he was inappropriate with children, and she kicked the crap out of him for cheating on her. They both ended up in jail shortly after, him for the 13-year-old and her for stabbing him in the leg. Me and a friend were sitting around working on his Mazda when he mentioned that he only did it in the butt with his girlfriend because she had a cyst the size of a baseball in her hoo-ha and it grossed him out. Total non sequitur. I paused a minute and then just eventually said, "Your air cleaner is dirty." As a kid, I was playing along the shore of the Ohio River while visiting Dad's family. I found some neat sticks in the water and started collecting them when my cousin walked up. He was probably about 20 at the time, and he said, "I'm pretty sure those are human bones." Turns out they were. I was playing with a part of a murdered woman's femur. A few years back in college, I was playing Mario Kart Double Dash and drinking beer with a good friend of mine. I said, "Hey, pass me the turtle." He went, "Here you go, man." "Awesome. Take that, baby Mario." He then dropped in this gem. "Dude, I've got acquired immunodeficiency syndrome." Long, shocked silence from me. "Yeah."
When did you learn about it?
"A few weeks ago. I've been meaning to tell you for a while now."
Wow. I'm not sure what to say.
"Hey, your hiccups have gone."
What? Oh, you motherfricker.
You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. My mum said, "I want you to go to the shop for me and get this, this, and this. Oh, and by the way, Bluey, our dog, is dead. Don't forget the bread." Cue me bursting into tears. During my first week of the new job, my boss starts telling me and another employee about how he used to date a deaf girl, and that the reason they broke up was that he laughed when she screamed while they were doing the deed. Did you ever wonder if your mom gave your dad a down-under kiss just before she kissed you goodnight? Screw you, Uncle Tony. Screw you. I met this pretty cute girl at the beach a couple of summers ago. We started talking and playing volleyball. Everything seemed normal up until the part where they started describing their life.
"Yeah, well, my boyfriend is in jail right now for stabbing someone, and that reminds me, you want to see my stab scar?"
She shows me her stab scar and starts to tell me how she dropped out of school as a complete substance user.
"You know, I kind of feel lonely without my boyfriend, and he doesn't need to know about anything else."
I walked out. I was at a random hookup I met through a buddy. She said, not long after the hookup,
"So, how old are you?"
My buddy said before I could say anything, "He's 27. How old are you?"
"I'm 18, but don't worry, I've done the deed with someone who was 34 before. He's 40 now."
It was one of the most awkward moments of my life. It was also the last time I let my buddy hook me up with someone. Good fricking lord. Well, that's enough internet for the narrator for one day. Oh, wait a fricking second. He has to finish recording the second half of this script. Why? The things I do for you weirdos. My friend's girlfriend does this on the daily pretty much. We'll be talking to them about anything at all and she'll interject with, "One time, my mother bit me." Or, "When I was 6, a strange man came in through my window. I hate graveyards because dead people talk to me." It's kind of hard to salvage a conversation once it's taken that turn. I came home from high school one day and my parents told me that they had all of our family pets put down that day. 5 dogs and a cat. None of the animals were sick or hurt. In fact, one of them was only 2 years old. We had no problem affording their food and there were no legal issues. They just purely didn't want to take care of 5 85-pound bull mastiffs anymore. And it was my job to pick up their crap, not my parents'. From this experience, I learned that when you cry long enough, your tears become pink from blood caused by the irritation. I told my parents to go F themselves and lived in the basement for over a month. It was furnished. My mum left food for me at the top of the stairs, and somewhat unrelated, this is when I also taught myself how to code in assembly because I needed a distraction. A few months later, we went to a breeder and bought a West Highland White Terrier. He was a good dog, but I was always slightly concerned that they would randomly kill him too. My folks soon got divorced, and when they did, they didn't ask me who I wanted to live with, and didn't fight for custody of me, but they did fight like that couple on the War of the Roses over that fricking dog. So, at age 17, I moved out of the house. I had a job. I moved into my own apartment in a crappy neighborhood. To this day, I still don't forgive nor understand my parents, even though they passed away a long time ago. I was studying in the Dominican Republic and living in a very rural area. I passed my days sitting around talking to whoever. One day, I was in a town I frequented, and this guy I hadn't seen before starts talking to me. Within 5 minutes, he tells me this, totally straight-faced. When I was little, I had a goat, and I used to play with the goat. But then I got too old, so I stopped playing with him. One day, I was sitting like this, and he had his knees apart, and the goat got mad that I wouldn't play with him. He charged, hit me between the legs, and took out my family jewels. Now I have none. I sat there, in shock, hoping that my Spanish was poor enough that I misunderstood. Sadly, an hour later, I hear the same story from his aunt, who's giggling while telling the story with the poor guy sitting right there. Not a conversation I was directly involved in, but there's still a high degree of what the frick. I was talking with some friends the other day, and one of them mentioned that while she was at work, her friends there brought up the topic of deepest, darkest secrets. One immediately volunteered the information that every time she goes to the bathroom, she sniffs her undies. Apparently, everyone just gaped awkwardly, and the conversation quickly shifted to other topics. Seriously, if a topic like that ever comes up, don't be the first one to share. A girl I met for a blind date, which was already a disaster on so many levels, casually dropped this nugget as I was hurriedly bringing her home.
Yeah, so this one time a girl told people that my friend got her pregnant, and it was a lie. It ruined the kid's life. So the next time I saw her, I shivved her in the neck.
Huh. I accelerated the car slightly faster.
My dad left me on the freeway once for several hours, and now that I'm grown up, he steals my money and blames me for everything that goes wrong.
Yeah, that was about the third or fourth conversation I'd had with that guy. Way to drop dramatic family conversations into a conversation about cinnamon buns, my man. I was catching up with one of my ex-girlfriends who I hadn't seen in years. We parted on good terms, so it was just friends catching up. She was kind of weird in a monkey cheese ninjas pirates kind of way when I knew her, so this came as something of a shock. She went blah blah blah, and then I had my kids, but that was after I lost my leg. What, you lost a leg?
Yeah, we got in a shootout with some white supremacist group and I got hit in the leg. I didn't want to go to the hospital because the last doctor I saw was an N-word, and I think he's the reason I lost my eye. So I put it off and it finally got really infected, and then those dirty Indian doctors cut it off. Fricking dotheads.
Okay, and who was we again?
Oh,
and she names some other white supremacist group.
You know, I can get you in if you want. The racial cleansing is coming, and I'd hate for you to be on the wrong side of the race war. You're smart enough to be an officer, and we need someone good at planning, because the N-words…
I just said, ah. So that's how I found out my ex-girlfriend was a one-legged, one-eyed white supremacist that gets into shootouts. Well, call me mindlessly optimistic, but the narrator is mostly just glad that by the sound of that story, most of those awful humans were too busy killing other white supremacists to devote much of their time to anything else. I was young and thought Red Lobster was an awesome restaurant. I had a bit of extra money just then, which was rare, so I asked this girl out. She was young, hot, in her early 20s or late teens, smoking body. We're sitting in the waiting area for our tables to be ready when this couple comes in with a toddler in a stroller. She smiles at the little boy and he smiles back at her. That's when she says,
"Oh, he's so cute. He looks just like my 2-year-old.
I'm rolling with this. Okay, she has a kid that she didn't mention. We'd talked a couple of times before, but never dated. So that's cool, I'm thinking. I can deal with this. Then she drops the bomb. Turning to me, she says,
By the way, did I mention I have 5 kids?
No. No, that didn't come up. Oh, I've got a couple for you. I was working at a grocery store. I was at the customer service desk. My boss was there. She was about 25-ish, maybe 20. We're talking about partying. I told her I like drinking bourbon to get real messed up. She tells me that, oh my god, she got so wasted off Jack one night, she was at a party and was basically blacking out, and she figures she gave just about every guy at the party a down-under kiss. What? I didn't know what to do. Did I hear that correctly? Holy crap. A couple of months later, I got the world's crappiest kiss of the same sort from the same girl. Practice demonstrably does not equal perfect. Even the handy was like some kind of sword-in-the-stone misadventure. Just terrible. Another time, I was talking to my roommate, an English guy. I was explaining the concept behind Toots and the Maytals' 5446 song. He was a real kind English guy, and as I'm talking, he just sticks his finger into his nose, then that same finger into his mouth, and he sucks the frickin' thing dry better than my boss ever did. Both so different, both so similar, both so surreal. A guy once paid $300 to take a tinkle on me in some alley, said a late 30-something employee of mine. I may as well throw in one more. From the same office, I made the mistake of dating one of the female junior staffers. Our chain of command was entirely separate, so it should have been okay, but such things never work out as planned. Anywho, after flirting a bit at a bar, she asks me if she can spend the night at my place. She's 21, 98 pounds, and cute, so I consent. Get back, start making out. This is the first time we've ever made out, and 10 minutes or so in, she says, I was a victim of the unspeakable act. What? I pull away. No, don't pull away. That's the worst thing you can do. I'm just telling you, it happened to me. Thus began a 2.5-month relationship from hell. I was at a bachelor party talking to one of the exotic dancers. She says, sure, I'll do the deed with the groom and even the best man, but after 3 or 4 guys, it gets kinda gross, you know? Her and I were on a first date, and upon her seeing a couple with a baby, she said, I really want a baby. After you get married? No, I mean now. I don't need a husband, I just want a baby. The same girl, later that night, after being around some of my friends, told me that I must not like her because I was too nice to her around them. That if I really liked her, I would have put her down and made fun of her in front of them. There were a few too many issues going on there for me. Visiting my dad in Florida, he says to me, I think the internet will be slow for the next hour. I'm downloading a naughty movie. What was the wildest thing to happen to you at your normal, regular job? Whew, mine would most definitely be what happened today at work. I work at Subway and it was pretty much dead at about 8 a.m. There was an older man who came in, about 6'4", 250 pounds, and he looked about 40 or so. He seemed very shady when I first said hi to him. He walked up to the counter and I asked, "What can I get you today, sir?" And he replied with, "I want a bag of money," in the most serious tone. Now, I've had people come in and joke by saying they want $1 million, and normally we just laugh about it. So I chuckled a little, but his facial expression didn't change. So I asked again, "What can I get you, sir?" And then he asked for the money again with that stern look. At this point, I'm getting extremely nervous because he seemed very serious. 30 seconds of silence went by that seemed like it took 5 minutes. He asked again for a bag of money and I said, "I'm sorry, but I can't do that, sir. Would you like something to eat?" He just stared at me a little longer, never changing his facial expressions. Finally, he decided he wanted a sandwich, but never lost the stern expression on his face. I still don't know whether he was actually being serious about wanting to rob me or if it was all a joke that he never let me know about. It scared the wee-wee out of me nonetheless. In short, a man tried to rob me and I made him a sandwich. I was working in a mall at a burger joint when I looked up and saw a guy coming out of the men's room holding a bloody butcher's knife. The man calmly walked through the food court and out of the mall exit as my manager and I both looked at each other, not believing what we saw. I swear 1 minute later, as we're trying to call security, 15 cops ran by with guns drawn. Turns out the guy had stabbed someone to death in the bathroom. The cops were there so fast because the same guy had violently attacked someone else the day before and escaped. He was recognized by a witness prior to going into the bathroom. In short, I saw the aftermath of a homicide while flipping burgers in a mall. I used to work in a dementia ward. I've been bitten, peed on, had things thrown at me, and attacked by a guy who was hallucinating. But the scariest thing was when one of the electric fireplaces caught fire and 2 of the men in the ward just locked their doors. The time between calling 911 and the firemen getting those 2 out was terrifying. We can only hope that this incident maybe encouraged the ward to perhaps update their doors to ones that couldn't trap the occupants into their own private furnaces during an event like this. But then again, these facilities tend to be underfunded, so who can say? I'm on disability right now due to my scariest work experience. I was a roofer by trade and I'd been working 7 days a week, 10 to 12-hour days, for 3 months. Working on a Sunday, I was finishing the last bit of work for a job at the peak of a roof when some kids came by. They asked if they could go inside the home to talk to the homeowner, and I said no very politely. They then pleaded to at least take pictures of the heritage home I was working on for their school project. Feeling sorry for them, I said, "Okay, fine, but no pictures of the construction, just be quick and careful." Right afterwards, they walked right below where I was working to take a picture. This is where all heck broke loose. Just then, my nail gun slipped and started sliding from the peak of the roof towards the kids. It was gaining speed quick and I was shouting for them to run, move, get the frick out of the way, etc. They didn't. They probably didn't even know what was about to drop on them, so I chased it. I fed myself tons of slack on my lifeline, chasing this thing just to grab it as it was about to fall off. I was able to toss the gun in a completely different direction, but with all the momentum I had, there was no stopping me from going over the edge, and so much slack on my lifeline, so there was nothing to keep me from hitting the ground. I fell 15 feet onto a staircase, shattering my left heel when I landed. The kids moved when they saw me in the air, that much I remember afterwards. This was the scariest thing that's happened to me. Many close calls and all sorts of jobs I've had, but in this particular situation, knowing this is going to hurt like heck is almost indescribable. Surgery went well and 4 months into recovery now. The internet helps with passing the time. I used to work as a production assistant on Dexter. On one fateful afternoon, we were shooting the fight sequence in the garage from episode 3 of season 4, the one where Dexter confronts the vandalizing neighbor. We had a large blackout tent rigged over this person's house to allow us to shoot a day for night, and I was stationed just outside. It was sunny and hot as heck that afternoon, so after a few takes of shouting and fighting, a request came over the radio that Michael C. Hall and J.C. Mackenzie needed some water. I ran to the craft service truck, grabbed as many water bottles as I could, and booked it back to the house. As I stepped inside the tent from the bright sunlight, my vision went black. There was a lone practical light in the garage, meant to mimic Dexter's flashlight, which hardly provided sufficient illumination for my constricted pupils. I stumbled into the garage, arms full of water, doing my best to locate our actors. Despite the various crew members in the garage moving about, I was able to find JC rather quickly. He was right under the light talking to the director. So far, so good. I handed him a bottle and turned to find Michael. I spun around a couple of times, scanning the room, but no signs of MC Hall. Even as my eyes adjusted and shadows became clear, I couldn't find him. Then out of the corner of my eye, I saw a shadow move. As I turned around at that perfect moment, the dark passenger emerged. A figure clad in black, wearing a tattered ski mask, rose from the depths of whatever hell he came from and approached me. My spine froze. All the water bottles tumbled to the ground. For a brief moment, I felt the greatest fear I'd ever known. And then I realized it was Michael coming to grab a water. Man, did I look like a fool. He was very nice and apologetic about the whole thing and insisted he wasn't trying to scare me, but merely attempting to stay in character. We shared a good laugh, but seriously, he was wearing a ski mask and he's Dexter. Any man would crack. In short, Dexter Morgan scared me crapless in real life. I used to work with burrowing owls. We'd check nests with a long, flexible camera and a visor over our eyes. Well, one day I headed into this field, knelt down, put the visor on, checked the nest. It took about 15 minutes. Then I stretch up and take the visor off. About 50 cows are in a circle 360 degrees around me, staring at me with their cold, dead eyes. I have no idea how I didn't feel them walking over. They started to get nervous and excited as I packed up my stuff, and parted so I could see one very angry bull at the back of the herd. I did my very best calm speed walk out of there. In short, I hate cows with a fiery passion. I worked at an electronic buyback store. One day, a customer bought by a new 20-inch LCD monitor in the box. I made an offer and he was more than willing to sell me his product. We normally check all items to make sure they work before we pay out for them, so I decided I'd open the box and take a look inside. As soon as I opened the box, over 100 cockroaches come crawling out of it and all over my counter. It took me a good couple of seconds to realize what exactly was coming out of the box, but it was both scary and gross. In short, someone opened a box full of cockroaches at my store. The monitor was in the box, and the customer seemed really shocked and embarrassed about the whole thing. Two people who had come in with just kind of walked away from him as soon as it happened. Can you imagine the conversation between the guy's friends? "Damn it, Jerry, this is why we never take him anywhere. For Pete's sake, Jerry, can we hang out at least once without you opening a box full of invertebrates?" Seriously though, this sounds like it might have closed down the store for a while. Next is a story that stretches our prompt of normal jobs to its limit. This was a volunteer job I had a while back. The giant Pacific octopus had refused food for a few days, so I was told to bring up a variety of stuff and see if I could get him to eat. I went up to his tank, which was in an isolated area, and grabbed some food and waved it around in front of his cave. He immediately shot out, grabbed the thing I was using to feed him, a plastic grabber that you could use to pick up trash, and then wound a couple of arms around my arm. He then latched onto a rock in his tank and yanked me so hard that I was doubled over the tank wall and unable to move. I'd played with octopuses before, and while they often held on to me with a tentacle, they weren't hard to remove, but I could not get this guy to release me. I struggled and managed to get one arm off, but he quickly twisted another around my arm. He was slowly pulling my hand closer to his mouth, which was really freaking me out. I kept shoving food at him. Fortunately, I'd bought a lot, and curling my hand around away from him as much as I could, but I was terrified that my hand was going to get chomped on with his beak. It wouldn't have killed me, but they are venomous, and octopus bites can be pretty nasty, even from small ones. His beak was pretty big. Eventually, he relaxed enough to where I could lift him out of the water a bit. He still had a couple of arms wrapped around my arm, and he didn't much care for that, so he let go and went back into his cave. It left me with about 55 bruises on my arm from the suckers on his tentacles. In short, octopus grabbed me. I was worried he'd bite me. I spin a sign on the side of the road advertising ice cream for a local mum-and-pop store. An undercover cop pulled over a substance dealer right next to me, had him get out of the car, frisked him, and then confiscated a weapon he didn't have a license for. I awkwardly stood there advertising orange swirl ice cream. Did you take advantage? Say, you guys look like you could use some delicious ice cream right now. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out easymode, also linked below, and subscribe. I work in vet med. One day we had a guy come in with his dog who insisted that his dog's problem, I think it was a minor laceration, was a much more critical thing than those belonging to the 5 or 6 animals already waiting to see a vet, and he demanded that he be allowed to budge the queue. When his initial tactics failed, he began shouting at the receptionist. One of the vet techs went up to try and calm him down, and the guy lost it. He started screaming that making him wait in line was illegal because it meant we were denying the animal his medical assistance, and that before calling the cops on us, he'd be back for personal vengeance. He assured us that he'd bring a piece and any other weapons he could lay his hands on. A lot of people were shaken up, so we called the cops, and they promised to keep an eye on the place for the next few days. We hoped that would be the end of it, but we were wrong. He was back the next day in a karate gi, exactly like the ones that little kids wear to competitions, brown belt and all. He stood in the doorway screaming obscenities while going through every cliché karate pose imaginable. The cops were there within 2 minutes, and that was the last we saw of Karate Man. The weapon threat was terrifying, the outfit, not so much. In short, man came in demanding to budge the line, threatened to come back in with a loaded weapon. Instead, came back in a karate outfit and was promptly arrested. When I worked as a waiter, I always remember a chunky steak knife slipping off a plate I was carrying and watching it fall, tip first, landing at the bottom of the stairs a couple of floors below. A split second after someone walked right in front of it. At a shooting range. I hate new shooters. They get so excited about shooting anywhere in the same zip code of the target that they whip around and say, "Did you see that?" and end up waving their piece at you. It's scary. I used to manage a pizza place, and one Friday around 11:30 a.m., a guy came in looking no different than any other of the smack or crystal heads in the neighborhood. We asked how his day was, and he said, fine, and then when he asked what he'd like to order, he said, give me the frickin' money. The cashier said, what? And he repeated, give me the fricking money. He put his hand inside his jacket and pointed something from the inside. Hindsight tells me it was probably just his hand and not a real piece, but it's not the kind of thing you want to take chances with. The cashier slowly moved to open the drawer and set it on the counter, and the guy grabbed what he could and ran out the door. He only ended up taking about $100, basically what the register had started at, since we'd only been open for 30 minutes. It was just a helpless feeling, though, being in charge and having a cashier potentially in danger like that. I worked at a 5-star rated haunted house for a good 4 years. It was seasonal. My job was to be an evil clown, and my role was to spontaneously appear to the groups that were walking through. Many scary things have happened to me. I've been punched, thrown to the floor, scratched, and have had people try to rip off my mask. I've seen people wet themselves and blow chunks all over the place. However, my all-time, most scariest experience was when someone actually started dying in front of me. A woman walked through, passed out in front of me in the walkway, and after I tried helping her up, she began shaking and was trying to say something that I couldn't make out. The fire alarm is in the hall, so it was my first reaction to pull it. My manager ran right up to me and took over. Her eyes were already rolled to the back of her head by the time the ambulance got there, and they were able to save her. The next day, we were told she'd had an allergic reaction walking through the body bag room, which is a room full of elastic, and that's what she was allergic to. The body bag room soon turned into the asylum. Okay, if you're a puncher, stay the frick out of haunted houses. At best, you'll just hurt yourself, and at worst, you'll hurt someone else. In the middle, you'll break some expensive equipment. Yeah, you know what? This is true. The narrator has been guilty of victim-blaming the haunted house workers who get socked in these places. Really, why would you go into one of those things if this is the way you react? Do you want to get sued? I was working for a biotech company and an unknown substance spilled on me. I was freaking out for quite a while. It either gives you cancer or turns you into a superhero. Are you feeling lucky? I was thinking I didn't have any scary work experiences as a kid, but you've just reminded me of mine. I was working in a lab and we all had our powdered chemicals in a series of 7-foot-tall cabinets that slid out from the wall. Inside each one was 5 or 6 shelves with wire walls, so there were gaps. These held all the chemicals in place. One day I was going to put away one of the chemicals I'd been using and pulled out the unit, and this tiny vial of some chemical falls from the top shelf and smashes all over the place. At this point I'm thinking, frick, this thing must be poisonous if it comes in such a small container. So I tell everyone to clear out of the lab and I go to grab the head scientist. He just calmly tells me to go get my respirator and he'll come with me to check out what the chemical was. So we sweep it up into a bag and look at the chemical name, which was ridiculously long. Go to look it up in the MSDs and it turns out that it's the only chemical other than water that I've ever seen with all zeros for the health, flammability, reactivity diamond. I was working construction in the world's biggest oil refinery when there was an explosion maybe 50 yards from me and a big old fiery mushroom cloud shot into the air. We ducked behind some big concrete pipes, since you never expect only one explosion in a refinery, but nothing else happened. I don't consider it my scariest work experience by any means, but this is the one that seems to fit the question the best.
Wait, you mean this isn't your scariest? You have more? Do tell.
I've got so many I've written books about them, but specifically in that oil refinery we oftentimes work up high on the steel frame structures, supporting pipes and whatnot. Our team had a cherry picker on it, which is basically a mobile crane for picking up heavy stuff. We mostly placed stuff like valves and 30-foot-long pipes, maybe a foot or two in diameter, and welded them together. Once we had threaded a pipe via the cherry picker through a complex piping network a couple of stories down from where the tip of the crane boom was situated. The crane held the pipe while we maneuvered it. We were all under that heavy pipe at various times. We finally got it installed, and a bit later were walking to the next job on a refinery road with the cherry picker following us. Its boom was compressed as short as it could go and sticking out straight horizontally atop the mobile platform, with its end hook dangling maybe 10 feet behind the crew as we walked. We heard a thud and turned around to see the hook had fallen off the crane's tip, while it was carrying no load at all. If that had happened just a few minutes earlier while it held the pipe, me or others on the crew would surely have been killed, or at least parts of us crushed and permanently crippled or in need of amputation. To me, something like that was scarier than the fiery mushroom cloud. In that same place, invisible clouds of poison gas were a constant risk. There were little stations sprinkled about the place with sensors, sirens, and revolving lights, with signs saying that if the lights and sirens turned on, to run for your lives away from the station. That happened at least once, maybe more times. It's been over 30 years since then, so I'm hazy on the details. Invisible clouds of death are pretty scary and, to me, scarier than that explosion. I was at a client site supervising the installation of some new major 4000 amp 480 volt switchgear. There was a manufacturer rep there to help troubleshoot any problems we had during energizing the gear for the first time. So everything went smoothly at first, opened all the feeder breakers and then closed the main incoming 4000 amp breaker. So far, so good. As we slowly close the smaller feeder breakers one by one, we get to one that trips as soon as we try to close it. It was probably wired wrong. So the rep opens the main breaker to kill the power to gear. He opens the malfunctioning breaker and sticks his hand in there to check the wiring. The guy fricking yelps, jumps back, and his hard hat comes flying off his head. For a half second, I thought I just watched someone die. Turns out the idiot forgot to discharge the control wiring, so he only got a minor shock from a small charged capacitor. As the construction manager, I had to write up the incident and had a very serious conference call with his employer. I think he might have been fired. I worked in a call center for a large US telecommunications company in sales for 5 years. A woman called in one day, depressed and needing to talk to someone. Her husband had just died, she'd lost her only child a year prior, and she said she didn't want to be alive anymore. This lady had it planned out in great detail, which is why I was even more concerned. I highly suggested 911 because they're trained to handle this sort of thing. At the end of the day, she just needed someone to talk to. I ended up talking her out of self-deleting over the phone and giving her a few other resources I knew of. The Prevention Lifeline, NIMI, among a few others. You'd think working for a phone company in sales could get you some odd characters that call in, and it makes for an entertaining story, but this particular incident certainly threw me for a loop. Regardless, at the end of the day, I'm glad this woman didn't take her own life. I work at a skate park. A few months ago, we had a guy try to slash, just ride up and nick the coping with his trucks, on the 7-foot quarter pipe that we call the tombstone. His trucks, the metal things that hold wheels to the skateboard deck, caught up, so he kicked out and wound up landing on the end of his board and shooting out. He smacked his head on the quarter pipe hard enough to break the helmet, and laid on the ground unconscious for a few seconds before going into a seizure. Had to call the ambulance and try to help him out. It took the ambulance 15 minutes to finally arrive. My boss went to visit him at the hospital, and the doctor said if he hadn't been wearing his helmet, he'd be dead. So kids, that is why I'm the jerk about the helmet rule. In short, wear your damn helmet. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out easymode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.